The story kicks off with a brutal invasion led by the Archlich, who turned a thriving kingdom into a wasteland. His undead army showed no mercy and shattered the protagonist's family. The last surviving human is Eds, the Empire's strongest swordsman on the brink of defeat. But this isn't really about him or the Archlich. It's about Damien, who was a regular guy until he became a Death Knight under the Archlich's control. Just when the Archlich thought he was about to claim the crown after all that bloodshed, Damien managed to break free. He landed a blow so powerful that even the demon generals couldn't protect their master. For the first time in ages, Damien acted on his own, catching the Archlich off guard, who believed he had wiped Damien's mind clean. But deep down, a part of Damien's soul had survived, hidden away and waiting for the perfect moment to fight back. The Archlich calls him his most incredible creation and lets him unleash his rage one last time before taking back control. The Demon Kings rush in together, but in an instant, a burst of purple light obliterates them all. The Archlich can't believe his eyes. They were wiped out in one hit. He raises his hand to summon a massive army of corpses, hoping to overwhelm the Death Knight. But Damien raises a hand, telling them to stop. Black wings spread from his back and a swirling purple aura surrounds him as he commands the undead to surrender. He tightens his fist and the undead freeze, glowing from within before exploding. The aura sweeps across the battlefield. The Archlich trembles, realizing he's created something that rivaled a god. He admits he gets Damien's rage and says he'd feel the same in his position, but he's just stalling. Even if this body bites the dust, he'll just move his soul and come back again. The Death Knight reflects on all those years he was trapped, consumed by the thought of taking down the Archlich. A blue aura surrounds him while he readies a sword move powerful enough to slice through a Demon King's soul. The Archlich laughs, claiming that's impossible. He attempts to teleport, but it's way too late for that. The Death Knight steps forward and unleashes his move, which cuts right through the Archlich. At first, the Archlich seems fine, looking down without a scratch and chuckling, thinking it's all a joke. But then a black aura bursts from his throat, and he screams as the slashed tears open the sky, pulling him into a swirling vortex. His eyes flicker before an explosion erupts above him, and his skull crashes to the ground next to the Death Knight. The Death Knight crushes it underfoot, telling him to rot in hell. Emperor Howard shakes in confusion, not grasping what just happened. The Death Knight drops to his knees, relieved it's finally over. But there's still one more thing he has to do. He raises his sword, feeling the need to apologize, even if it's too late. Under the control of the Archlich, he killed his own family without wanting to. As blood spills, he drives the blade into his own body. A voice calls out his name. It's Louise. He recognizes her. As darkness fades and light returns, he opens his eyes to see Louise asking why he's sleeping outside. He smiles, relieved to see her before hell drags him back down. But something feels off. She looks way too young. She laughs, telling him to get inside before their dad scolds him again, saying that Big Sister is always around. As she runs off, he whispers that he's pretty sure he destroyed this mansion. He glances at his hands, wondering if this is all a dream or if being a Death Knight was the dream itself. He picks up a twig, aims it at a rock, and thinks it feels right. He charges forward and thrusts it. The twig snaps, but the rock doesn't budge. He bursts out laughing, realizing how ridiculous it is. That rock totally won. Laughter turns to trembling as he clutches his head, looking up at the sky and falling to his knees. Rain begins to pour as Damien holds his chest, muttering that this isn't a dream. He really did go back to the past. We get to know more about him before he turned into a Death Knight. He admits his one real skill was ruining his family's name. His dad once yelled at him, asking why he was constantly stirring up trouble and how he even managed to get kicked out of a bar. Then there was that time his brother stormed into his room, furious that he had punched the young master of a Leon Bloom march. Because of him, Louise ended up getting dragged away in a carriage and forced to marry. Damien feels like he's only ever messed up his family's future. His mom lost it on him once, crying and screaming because he borrowed money using their land as collateral, leading them to lose everything they owned. That talent of his got him exiled by his own father. The day he left, Louise called out to him, offering him some cash and telling him he had to be happy. He was shocked she still cared even after he ruined her life. He hesitated at first, but then he took the money and ran. That day felt like he was escaping from his own family, and he learned what guilt and shame truly meant. He broke down in tears. Now that the rain has stopped, he's thinking about how he ended up back in the past. You want to say sorry, but this feels like a miracle. The clouds clear and a ray of light hits him. His hand shakes as he realizes something he dreaded. His body is so weak that he can barely use the wave-breaking technique, which boosts the power of a strike. He dodges a massive hammer and lands a clean hit, mentioning he learned this move after taking down the knight known as the Castle Wall Destroyer. Someone shouts, "Young master." Damien turns to the kid and tries to remember his name. Was it Victor? Victor tells him Louise said to come back and that their patriarch is furious. Damien asks what he did to upset him. Victor looks shocked that he doesn't remember. Inside the Haxon Viscounty, his father, Paul Osborne Haxon, is livid. He calls Damien a bastard and swings a sword at him. Damien dodges while his mom and sister try to pull Paul back. Paul yells about whether Damien went to a bar again and how he keeps disgracing their name. But Damien just smiles. He's genuinely happy to be back in this moment. His mom and sister pleaded with Paul to stop, asking if he really wanted to kill his own son. Damien stays quiet, thinking about how long it's been since he was scolded. Even if it hurts, he really misses his dad. His body shakes, and he starts to cry. Paul's mom and sister give him a hard time for being too harsh. Finally, Paul lowers his sword and asks Damien what's going on. Damien says he has no explanation. Paul's taken aback. Damien admits he's a mess, and it's all on him. Paul is shocked again. He thought there'd be excuses. He tells Damien his mouth might be working, but it won't save him. Damien bows and says he's going to fix his mistakes and come back to face the music. Everyone in the room is perplexed. Paul mumbles that maybe he hit his head too hard. Damien heads out to the merchant city of Landor. In a narrow alley across from a building, Victor asks if he's really going in there. He warns Damien that the place is tied to some shady people and things could go south. Damien shrugs and says Victor can always bail if he's scared, but Victor insists that if Damien's going, he's going too. Damien plans to apologize to the owner, hoping it can make up for some of the mess he made. As they pass a church, he confesses he doesn't even know how he came back, but if this is a second chance from God, he won't waste it. He's determined not to let his knack for screwing things up define who he is. When they reach the door, two bouncers block their way. One tells Damien to stay away. Damien recognizes them and says he just wants to apologize. The bouncers laugh, saying he's acting all nice because he's a noble. One of them starts trashing his family, mocking his sister's looks and saying she's the only decent thing in their family. Then he slaps Damien, telling him to bring his sister if he wants forgiveness. Damien thinks it's too much to handle. He grabs the guy's knife and realizes he was being naive, thinking an apology would cut it. The guy laughs and asks what he's mumbling about, but then suddenly, his hand gets chopped off and flies through the air. Both bouncers are in shock as the guy drops to his knees, screaming. Damien steps up, saying if they want to see what the eldest son of a worthless family is really like, he'll show them. Victor watches from the alley, thinking his buddy's gone off the deep end. When a screams, a crowd starts to form. The second guy steps up and asks if Damien even knows who they are. Damien shrugs and tells him to get on with it. The guy says it sounds cheesy, but he better listen up because no one messes with the black snakes and just walks away. He rolls up his sleeve to show off a tattoo on his hand. Damien suddenly remembers. The black snakes were really starting to make a name for themselves back then, and this bar was one of their hangouts. He recalls being beaten and humiliated here for just complaining about the overpriced food. Looking back, he thinks he was the one who should have gotten an apology. The thug scoffs at his smirk and charges at him with a sword, but he misses and only snags a few strands of Damien's hair. Before he can process what just happened, Damien kicks his leg and slams him face first into the ground. The guy groans, coughing and holding his nose. Standing over him, Damien says cutting him down would be too easy. He grabs the man's leg and tells him to hold on for his family's sake. As Damien goes after the tendons, the thug begs him to stop. All we see is blood spraying and his screams echo through the alley. Both thugs end up lying wounded and trembling. Then someone yells out, asking what's going on. Damien turns to see a group of guys approaching. They want to know if he's part of another gang and where he came from. Damien coolly says it's nothing like that. He just came to apologize, but it turns out he's the one who deserves an apology. He says he wants to file a complaint with the owner and tells them to show him the way. The lead guy scoffs, saying he doesn't get what Damien's talking about. But since he's not giving a straight answer, they'll just beat him down. He signals his men to attack. 3 thugs come at him. Damien sighs, finding it a hassle. He takes a deep breath and charges in. In a flash, he slices off the first guy's arm and the second's and leaves the last one without hands. That guy won't even be able to wipe himself after this. Damien stops and the lead thug watches in shock as his men scream in pain. Panting, Damien asks if the guy still wants to fight. The thug nervously says no and offers to settle things up if Damien can forgive them. Damien responds by chasing him down. The guy turns to run, but Damien grabs him and there's a loud crunch. Inside the bar, the crowd is chilling with their drinks when the doors burst open. Everyone turns to see Damien dragging the thug by the shoulders, his body bent at an awkward angle like a broken bird. Damien drops him and says this is what happens when people don't listen while he's being polite. The crowd stares in horror as Damien wipes blood off his face, confused about why everyone is panicking. When they scatter in fear, he shrugs and thinks whatever. At least the annoying ones are gone. From above, a voice asks about the noise and the missing guards. It's Anderson Holm, the bar's owner. Damien looks up and asks if that's him. He calmly says he dealt with the guards outside. Anderson notices another thug knocked out on the floor. Anderson can't believe it and demands to know who Damien thinks he is, causing a scene in someone else's spot. Damien introduces himself, and when Anderson finds out he's from the Haxon Viscounty, he thinks it's a joke. Damien insists he's not here to stir up trouble, he just wants an apology. Anderson scoffs and asks what he's on about. Damien explains that the food was crazy overpriced, like some wannabe salt bar joint. He complained, ended up getting beaten up and thrown out, and now everyone's calling him a drunk and a disgrace. His family's reputation took a hit too. Anderson laughs, saying that honor means nothing if your family's got none left. Damien realizes this convo is going nowhere. Anderson lifts his cane, telling Damien that a simple sorry isn't gonna cut it, and that he needs to pay for the damage. Damien chuckles. He was ready to let it go, but if that's how Anderson wants to play, then fine. He charges forward, jumps off a table, and flies at him with his sword drawn. But suddenly, a guy drops down from the balcony and hits him in midair with a slash of blue energy. Damien manages to block it and lands on his feet. Anderson grins, saying Sir Ted just showed up right on time. Damien's surprised. He didn't expect a knight to be hanging around a bar. We're diving into the knight system. Knights train in martial arts and are ranked by skill. Trainees are at the bottom, apprentices are in the middle, and official knights are at the top. Those official knights can tap into aura, slicing through mountains and breaking castle walls like it's nothing. They're pretty much superhuman. Anderson was bragging that Ted's an apprentice knight and is tight with a black snake boss. He claims Damien's as good as dead. Damien realizes that if Ted's just an apprentice, it makes sense why he felt such a weak aura earlier. Ted's stunned since he hadn't even activated it. How did Damien catch that? Damien figures that Ted got turned down for being an official knight because he lacks talent. Ted clenches his teeth and Anderson asks how much it cost to deal with Damien. But when Anderson calls him an apprentice, that sets Ted off. He charges in, yelling that he'll tear Anderson apart. Ted swings hard, but Damien sidesteps him effortlessly. Ted keeps trying to land hits, going for his head, but Damien keeps dodging and points out that while Ted's swings are wild, his attacks have some bite to them. Ted gets serious and starts charging an aura for a big move. Damien realizes he's about to unleash his secret technique and gets ready to counter. Right before the hit lands, the scene shifts to a memory. A ghostly assassin is seen taking out an old knight. The assassin is bored, saying killing humans is lame. He tells Damien to skedaddle, he values his life, and warns him he's about to see the blade of death. To the assassin, human bodies are just water. Slicing through them is as easy as pie. Even a wooden sword could get the job done. He taunts Damien for not walking away when he had the chance. But then he hears something weird. Flesh regenerating. He looks and sees his body reattaching. He's stunned, whispering it can't be real since he cut him in half. Damien stands in front of him, calm and quiet. With just his bare hands, he slices the assassin in two using that same blade of death technique. The assassin laughs as he dies, confused about how Damien pulled off their secret move. Back to the present, Ted collapses, holding his chest. He breathes out no as life slips away from him. Damien's sighs always wraps up the same way. His foes never get what really takes them down. After becoming a Death Knight, he gained the ability to absorb the skills and powers of those he defeated. Now, all that belongs to him. Anderson gapes in shock. A moment later, trembling and too freaked out to look up, he bows to Damien, apologizing for messing up the Haxon name. He offers up a stack of cash, asking if it's enough to make things right. Damien replies that he just wanted an apology, but he'll take the cash too. It's not quite enough, but he's willing to let it slide this time. He calls for Victor to grab the money. Victor jumps into action, still trying to wrap his head around what he just witnessed and wondering how Damien got such crazy skills. As they leave, Anderson and the two bouncers bow nervously, wishing them a safe trip back. Victor can't believe the amount of cash in front of him. Anderson mutters about getting it all back and talks about having a chat with the Black Snake boss. But Damien suddenly stops and says he forgot something. In one swift motion, he slashes past Anderson's ear and lops it off. He mentions that the money almost made him forget about the punishment and adds that he used the blade of death. Leaning in closer, he warns Anderson that if the Black Snake ever touches his family, he won't let it go. Anderson clutches his ear, screaming in pain and swearing that Damien will regret this. But Damien just walks away. He knows this doesn't erase his past mistakes, but in this new life, he's determined to protect his family. He and Victor head home. As the sun sets, the scene shifts to the Leon Blue March, where a man stands in front of a mirror, asking his brother if he's heard the saying that pain always follows love. His brother rolls his eyes and asks what nonsense he's going on about now, wondering if he's planning to fight or just being dramatic. The man turns around saying no, he's actually going to find his love. His brother scoffs and mutters, "What a freak." Back at the Haxon estate, Damien stretches and mentions it's been a while since he enjoyed a solid night's sleep. Victor, feeling the pressure, admits he's kind of jealous since he didn't sleep a wink, too worried about everything that went down. Damien reassures him that it all worked out. Sure, things got a bit chaotic, but soon enough, rumors will spread about someone messing with the Haxon family and paying the price. That should help clean up their reputation and maybe even change how people see the so-called good-for-nothing eldest son. Victor is surprised by Damien's self-awareness, but can't shake off the worry about the Black Snake. Not only did Damien go up against their members, but he also took on an apprentice knight they hired. Damien shrugs it off, saying no matter how bold they are, they won't touch his family. And if they try, he'll be there to stop them. Victor nods, but still can't help but wonder about Damien's sword skills. They're way too good to be just normal. So where did he pick up those fighting skills? Damien just brushes it off, saying he trained here and there. Suddenly, Paul bursts down the hall yelling Damien's name, waving his sword around, calling it his love stick, and panicking about where he's been, convinced he stirred up more trouble. Damien tells him to chill. He has already cleaned up his mess, nodding at Victor, who dropped a heavy bag of cash on the floor. Paul and Marilda stare at it, stunned. Victor then pulls out a land deed and adds it to the pile. Damien explains he went back to the tavern where he got thrown out and cleared things up. Turns out the math was wrong, and the owner gave him the money and land to apologize. Paul squints, questioning if that's really true. Damien swears it is, and Marilda backs him up, saying there's no way he could have pulled all this off alone. Damien suggests Paul can ask Victor if he still doubts him, giving a wink while Victor awkwardly nods in agreement. Paul still looks skeptical, but Marilda believes him. While she praises Damien, Victor mutters under his breath that Damien might just be a compulsive liar. Later, Damien leans against a tree, panting. He hasn't even done much, but is already out of breath. His body feels weak and slow, and he knows he's got a long road ahead. Still smiling, he pulls out a small vial. Flashing back, he remembers asking what it was. Anderson told him it was a tonic from the Alchemy Academy to boost stamina and energy. Damien recalls the Academy well. Their tonics are worth more than gems. Feeling lucky, he gulps it down and lets out a satisfied sigh. Then it hits him. Overcome by this sudden rush, he accidentally crushes the empty vial. He mutters that this stuff hits differently. He knows that if he wants to get strong quickly, he needs to build his stamina first. He has to get back to his former strength before the Archlich raises his undead army again. That future war is coming. He has to stop it before it begins, before it takes everything from him again. The scene cuts to a tall tower right in the middle of the city, serving as the Black Snake's hideout and landwork. Inside, a grubby guy grumbles that Ted's pretty much useless now. He used to be their best fighter, which really sucks. Ted is just lying on the floor, barely hanging on. Some guys ask if they should help him out, but the fat dude, Cedric Walker, who's in charge of the Black Snake, coldly tells them to just throw him out. It's a bit ironic considering his last name, since Cedric clearly can't walk. The goons are unsure and ask if that's really what they should do. Cedric shrugs it off and says that anyone can be bought if you throw enough cash at them. Out of nowhere, Ted groans and starts to get up, leaving Cedric pretty surprised that he still has any fight left in him. With a smirk, Cedric jokes that maybe he'll consider hiring Ted again if he gets some treatment. But Ted, fed up with Cedric's jabbering, grabs his sword and yells that he's done listening to him. He charges at Cedric in a rage, but just as he's about to swing, his body freezes up. Something grabs his leg and a strange purple energy crawls up his arm, yanking the sword right out of his hand. Ted freaks out and shouts, asking what's going on. Then a voice pops up, wondering if Ted could be their first target. Cedric smirks and replies, "Definitely. I can't wait to see what you've got." Ted begs them to stop, but the aura tightens. He's dragged into a magic circle. Enchantment grows stronger. Minor demons appear along with a giant eye beneath him. One of the creatures drools on his shoulder. A saliva melts through his flesh. Ted screams for mercy, but they swarm him and rip him apart. All that remains is his severed leg in a pool of blood. Cedric grimaces, calling it gross. The mage who worked the ritual checks in, asking if he's happy with it. Cedric nods and says he is, but next time he wants it to be cleaner. The mage then brings up the next job. Cedric explains that's why he reached out. Someone messed with their organization. Since it's a noble group, they can't just retaliate openly. He only wants the culprit to feel the pain. The mage smirks, takes the payment up front, and assures Cedric to leave it all to him. After a tough training session, our guy is still pushing through, cranking out heavy squats to build muscle and stamina. It's been going great, but the last couple of days have felt way too quiet, as if something bad is about to happen. He figured the Black Snake group would have shown up by now. Just as he reaches for his water bottle, he picks up on two assassins lurking nearby and bolts at insane speed. Surprised, he ends up pining for Abel, his geeky little brother. He quickly lets go and Abel crumples to the ground, stunned by how strong Damien is. At least his head's still in one piece. Damien quickly apologizes and offers his hand, explaining he didn't mean to go all out on him like that. But Abel just brushes him off. He mentions hearing about the bar incident and the owner's apology. Word on the street is that a brawl broke out and a bunch of people got hurt. Abel calls him out for lying to their family. Instead of dodging it, Damien owns up to what happened. Abel's jaw drops as he asks how Damien managed to take on so many people. It sounds impossible unless he had someone like Agent 47 helping him out. But even with Damien being straight with him, Abel isn't convinced. All he cares about is keeping the family name clean. They're sick of cleaning up after him. Damien totally gets it. He ruffles Abel's hair, thinking his brother's got a good heart. That's why he stays chill and just says there's nothing to worry about anymore. Their convo gets interrupted when Victor bursts in, panting and looking panicked. Both brothers snap into gear and rush into the house, bursting through the door to find their parents face to face with a guy they vaguely recognize as the same dude who said he was on some kind of love quest. When he spots Damien, he smirks and says he just wants to chat about the banquet. This guy is Erwin Leon Bloom, the weaker, evil version of Erwin from Attack on Titan, which is a bummer, considering he's got some serious connections to our main dude. To really get what's going on, we have to rewind a bit. At the banquet, Damien and Erwin had a major clash. Damien got all fired up while Erwin kept his chill, poking at him more. The drunk troublemaker couldn't hold back, bringing up how Erwin dissed his sister and threw shade at him, so he felt justified in being angry. Erwin cleverly twisted things around to make it seem like it was all on Damien. Then he got right in Damien's face, tossing out insults and claiming that even if he did talk trash, there was nothing Damien could do about it. That stung. In a split second, Damien messed up. He threw a punch. It felt good, even if it wasn't the most brilliant move. After taking a hit, the noble just grinned like it was all part of the plan. Looking back now, Damien realizes that Erwin let the punch land on purpose. The guy is slick enough to dodge punches and just about skilled enough to be a knight. Turns out that little slimeball was just biding his time. During a family meeting, he boldly tells Damien's folks that he's into their daughter, Louise. At first, the Viscount is confused about what he's getting at, until Erwin pops the question and proposes. The Haxon family is shaken up by the news. Damien bites his tongue, knowing this is exactly how it went down in his past life. Erwin plays his cards, saying he'll let the whole banquet mess go if they link up with his family and avoid drama. But his dad shoots him down without thinking twice. Erwin gets even more irritated when he finds out Louise is already engaged. Then there's the issue of him being humiliated in public. Erwin warns the Haxon family that they won't be able to deal with the fallout if they turn down his proposal. They've got to pick him or face the music. It's a tough call for the Viscount, knowing how powerful the Leon Bloom family is. But deep down, he knows how shady Erwin really is, and his instincts won't let his daughter get hurt like that. Louise suddenly steps up and offers to marry Erwin. Watching his daughter do this makes the Viscount break down, and he tries to tell her they'll figure something else out. Abel is furious, arguing that she shouldn't have to pay for Damien's mistakes. Damien feels guilty, too, but Louise just keeps smiling and says she'll go with Erwin. Now that things are leaning in his favor, Erwin has this smug grin, obviously pleased with how it turned out. As he gets ready to leave, he mentions that a formal request will be sent to work out the details. But just then, the devil himself shows up, staring daggers at Erwin. Anyone with a sister would understand the look on our guy's face after everything that went down. Erwin mocks Damien and calls him his brother-in-law. Damien couldn't care less about him, but knowing he messed up his sister's life before is enough motivation to stop it from happening again. Louise can't believe her brother is standing up for her. He mutters something that the arrogant blonde noble doesn't even get. What he gets instead is a Mike Tyson uppercut that sends him flying. Damien realizes he messed up by taking the bait, but there's no way he's just gonna sit back and watch his family get ripped apart. The Leon Bloom guards come rushing in after hearing their young master yell. They pull out their weapons, ready to take down whoever hurt him. Damien looks at them and realizes they're his own escort guards. But Erwin, still smirking like an annoying pest, gets back up. Sick of being pushed around, he grabs his sword while the Haxon family watches in horror. Finally showing his true colors, he pulls out his blade and asks if his brother-in-law wants a quick death. To keep things from getting messy, Damien's guards jump in to handle it and protect his reputation. But Erwin isn't listening this time. He tells them to stand down. When one guard hesitates, Erwin punches him into the wall. He might seem weak, but he's almost at night level and coldly warns them again. His glare is seriously chilling. Abel and Louise are apprehensive about their brother. Erwin shows up all set to finish things off, and he's thinking about how the Haxon family has only made everything worse. Louise feels something's off and tries to step in, but Damien stops her this time because he's not letting her be the one to sacrifice again. With a look that says he's got it covered, he steps up for a one-on-one duel. The idea of a duel catches the Leon Bloom hair off guard. Damien lays down the rules. If he loses, he'll do whatever Erwin asks. But if he pulls off a win, everything that's gone down will be forgotten. Erwin hesitates because Louise has already given her thumbs up. He's got what he wanted, but Damien doesn't waver. He calls Erwin a coward for dodging the fight, and it hits right where it hurts his pride. Basically, Damien just dared him, and somehow, it worked. Erwin agrees to the showdown, thinking he'll wipe the floor with Damien and finally take his sister for good. The sadistic jerk accepts with a grin and points his sword. In the next scene, Damien's mom wants to jump in, but the Viscount holds her back. They're pretty confident in their son, believing he's got a plan, and now all they can do is trust him. Meanwhile, Abel knows how deep the trouble really runs. He's the only one who gets just how skilled Erwin is, comparing him to a full-blown knight. From that perspective, Damien's already at a disadvantage. As Erwin steps up to start the fight, he stops dead when he sees that Damien isn't even holding a sword. Calmly, Damien reassures him he'll be fine. To really mess with Erwin, he pulls out his trusty fork. Yep, a fork. Definitely not what you expect against the legendary stick of destruction. Erwin can't believe it and bursts out laughing, convinced Damien's totally lost it. Full of himself, he charges in to end this quickly, but his first move misses as Damien dodges easily. Erwin throws down a bunch of attacks using his fierce warring Leon's sword technique, which is his version of a Susanoo. Still, it's like he's fighting a wall. Damien stands his ground and blocks every hit. Even the guards hanging around are left stunned, wondering if Damien's just joking or if he's really that strong. From Erwin's perspective, Damien dodged every attack right after things kicked off. Not one hit connected. Damien felt pretty good about his training paying off. With his improved stamina, he can zip around without getting worn out. And surprisingly, he's doing all this with a fork. Plus, he's already starting to grasp the Leon Bloom sword style. Now here's the interesting part. In the original timeline, Damien went toe-to-toe with Michael Leon Bloom, the eldest son of the Leon Bloom family, a serious powerhouse. Compared to him, Erwin is a walk in the park, which is why Damien isn't breaking a sweat. Erwin, really worked up, starts unleashing waves of aura, refusing to accept that Damien's actually skilled enough to dodge him. But aura can be pretty dangerous, and now Damien has to figure out how to handle it. Erwin charges in full throttle, looking to land a killer shot. In that split second, Damien decides to use the sword sync technique, and a real showdown kicks off. But Erwin's world crumbles when his sword gets blocked and pushed back by a fork. He can't believe his eyes. Before he can blink, Damien pulls off his secret move called the Thunder Shadow Revelations. In a flash, the fork sends Erwin's sword flying. Without wasting a second, Damien wraps things up by stabbing the cocky noble right in the neck with the fork. Abel and Louise can't believe what they're seeing, and their parents look just as shocked. Erwin's dad shouts his name, but even though there's just a fork poking him, Erwin starts crawling away in pure panic. Damien thinks about how punishing Erwin over and over wouldn't be enough for what he's done, but he pushes those feelings aside for his family's sake. He announces that he thinks they have a winner and asks if anyone has an issue with that. Then he tells Erwin that, as he promised, it's time for him to leave for good. The whole Haxon family is sitting down for a meal, and our boy's really enjoying it. He lets them know he's off to train in the morning. As he heads out, the rest of the family keeps eating. Marilda looks over at Osborne and asks if he's not going to ask about what went down yesterday. Abel is really shaken up after what he saw yesterday, and his folks can tell. Osborne says it's best to give him some space, and that he'll open up when he's ready. Marilda sweetly calls him honey, and even though he's curious, he feels like he shouldn't dig deeper. He thinks our guy is his son, but there's just something about him that feels a bit off. As our guy ties a sandbag around his leg for some endurance training and gets ready to head out, Louise calls out to him, looking a bit relieved that he's still around. She nervously brings up what happened yesterday, and he thinks about saying sorry. Lowering his head, he admits that he acted a bit reckless and really put her in a tough spot. Louise puts her hand on his shoulder, letting him know it's not as bad as he thinks. She really appreciates his support and admits she was pretty scared. While she followed Erwin, her gut was telling her something else, pushing back against what she thought she wanted. With a little shake in her hand, she thanks him, showing that he really stepped up for her. She feels bad about the whole situation, but is also happy about his bravery. She wants to thank him and says, "Thanks, Damien." He smiles back, saying he ought to be the one thanking her for everything she's done. As she gets ready to leave, she insists it's nothing and tells him he can head out. But then she stops him and hands him a sword, explaining that it was her dad's favorite. He had asked her to give it to him for training. Damien is surprised, but Louise tells him that their father isn't good at expressing his feelings. However, he loves them. Damien contemplates his father's anger, recalling how he had once told him not to use a fork as a sword. In that moment, he withdraws the fork and raises it up, letting it shine brightly, feeling thankful for his father. Meanwhile, his father is sniffling, wondering what that breeze was just now. As night falls, a weird dark vibe starts creeping closer to their house while the guard, getting sleepy, lets out a big yawn. Out of nowhere, the dark aura wraps around them and starts pulling them away. As the gate swings open, the guy in a cloak steps out from this dark aura and makes his way into the house. He starts wandering around while everyone else is asleep. He heads toward one of the doors, and in that room, Louise is sound asleep. The guy moves closer, unable to help but admire her beauty. He thinks he's there to do a favor for Black Snake. He feels a bit lucky too. Just when he's about to get closer to Louise, Damien calls out to him. He's hanging out by the entrance of the room and asks what the guy is doing there. Without wasting any time, he gathers up some power in his fist to launch an attack. But our guy manages to dodge it like a pro, not even getting scratched. The mage, totally shocked, asks who the heck our guy is, but it's really our guy who's wondering that. The mage starts to think maybe he's dealing with Damien. Our guy confirms it, getting really mad about the whole situation and what the mage did to his sister. Suddenly, someone starts yelling about a commotion coming from the Louise room. The mage panics, figuring the servants might wake up because of the blast and thinks that would be bad news for him. So he transforms into this dark aura and makes a run for it out the window. Our guy tries to stop him, but it's too late. He's gone and out of reach. He can't believe he got away with it. He glances around and notices the remnants of that dark energy lingering nearby. The next morning, some of the servants are freaking out because their horse is dead right in front of them, and they know the Viscount will be livid. They see it as a total disaster since the horse seemed fine just yesterday, and they have no clue what happened. Then our guy jumps in and surprises them by admitting he had a bad feeling about it. But he reassures them not to panic because he's just there to check something out. He asks to borrow the room for a bit. He places a hand on the dead horse, trying to figure out where that dark energy he felt last night has led him. There's no doubt about it, this energy is definitely dark mana, meaning whoever did this is a dark mage. It looks like his family hasn't caught on yet, but worrying them isn't necessary. The trail of dark energy starts at the boy's house and eventually leads to a cave pretty far off. That cave is actually in the forest where the mage usually hangs out. He thinks the Black Snake's boss is pretty dumb for giving him everything he asked for. He had told him it was a curse, but that was just a cover. With the church after him, he knows he has to keep a low profile for now. Suddenly, someone shows up in the cave and the mage gets taken by surprise by a strange smell. It's our guide, who tells him that old men shouldn't be left alone for too long. The mage can't believe it's the eldest son of Viscount Haxon who managed to track him down, but our guide just followed the stench he left behind. The mage recognized that he had heard rumors about the guy going up against the Black Snake, and it seems he's no longer just a reckless kid. Our boy realizes that the mage must be the one hired by the Black Snake to cause trouble for his family, which is pretty pathetic considering the mage took that job and is now facing his demise. Hearing this, the mage goes on high alert. He basically says that our guy is pretty funny, and if he captures and tortures him, he could turn him into a cool pet. But our guy just shuts that down, saying he's not about to kill anyone unless he absolutely has to, except for filthy dark mages like him. That catch takes the mage by surprise, and he realizes our guy isn't just some average punk. Furious, he starts throwing a bunch of attacks at our guy, thinking that if he gets away, he'll cause some real trouble. But our guy dodges every single one of them, and then he strikes back hard, taking the mage down with brutal blows from his sword. The mage feels himself fading, but somehow keeps grinning even split in half, which makes our guy think he might be pulling some kind of magic trick he had seen before at a mansion. He's impressed that this guy is tough for someone with such a garbage job, but the mage confidently claims that kind of hit won't even faze him. Our guy responds, saying he'll just keep chopping him down until there's nothing left. With that, he goes all out, striking the liquid mage dozens of times in the blink of an eye. Even in pieces, the mage considers it not bad, realizing that's why our guy's name is getting around. He says that the moment he walked in here on his own, he was already dead. Then he grabs our guy's arm from behind, totally catching him off guard. The mage is in this wicked, monstrous form made of dark energy, and he starts casting all sorts of spells everywhere he counter. Our guy realizes this situation could get really dangerous, and the mage declares he's going to take down the ever-crossing Yulin officer. With that, he unleashes all of his dark energy on our guy, claiming that his whole body is about to rot and die. In no time, he completely traps our guy from head to toe with his dark energy. He sees him as a cocky threat who messed up his own chances. Cedric even mentioned that the worse the damage he does, the more he'll benefit, so he figures he's meeting that goal. Now that he thinks no one can mess with him, he plans to go after that woman he spotted yesterday. But our guy surprises him by casually bringing up some kind of decomposing curse, which catches the mage off guard. It leaves him wondering why our guy is still unaffected while he's completely free from that energy. He asks how he knows so much about dark energy, and honestly, the mage is stunned. He's baffled too. He glances at his hand where a symbol has shown up and can't wrap his head around how he still has any power left. Reflecting on his past life, Dorbo stands before the authority known as the Power of God. As he glances back, Dorbo spots his Death Knight, Damien, kneeling in front of him. This makes Dorbo think about how he's given Damien an incredible body and loaded him up with powerful magic. Still, he feels that it's not enough. He's determined to become the ultimate weapon himself. So he makes a cut on his hand, deciding to share some of that power with Damien to transform him into the ultimate weapon. With his hand raised, a huge burst of energy streams down toward him. This is actually the authority, and Dorgo channels it, casting a wild spell filled with insane power. When that energy hits, he screams from the pain. But once everything calms down, he realizes something amazing. He's finally unlocked the authority of God. At this moment, Damien starts to realize that the force of greed is back. It's that same power he had when he was a Death Knight. He thought he had lost it, but nope, here it is again, right in front of him. The mage tries to take advantage of the situation and attacks, but Damien dodges effortlessly. The mage demands to know how he survived the spell. Damien responds by throwing a question back at him, asking if everyone doesn't have a secret weapon or two up their sleeves. Basically, it's like having plot armor. He recalls that the mage mentioned being an officer of Yulin, which he knows is an organization that handles assassinations with dark magic. Hearing that, the mage starts to feel like something's off about him. The longer they drag this out, the worse things will get for him. He presses again, wanting to know how Damien managed to survive the spell, but Damien just brings up Hulane, another group specializing in dark magic assassination. The mage is starting to suspect that there's something really off about him. The more this goes on, the more trouble he might find himself in. He mentions that he meant to save this for when he confronted the church, but it looks like he needs it now. Suddenly, a bracelet on his wrist starts glowing bright and gives off a huge wave of green energy. This bracelet actually boosts his power. He realizes it must be packed with a ton of dark mana. With that artifact, he becomes way stronger and more monstrous, proclaiming that no matter what our guy does to mess with his spell, there's no way he can handle this. Then he unleashes a crazy attack, ready to burn everyone and send them straight to hellfire. He puts all his mana into a direct attack on our guy, and you can even see the effect on the cave. He's starting to think it's finally over as our guy gets hit with hellfire that burns endlessly and beyond death. But when the flames calm down, he confidently tells the mage that he's totally misunderstood things, which freaks the mage out. Our guy then reveals that the power of greed doesn't erase magic, that hellfire can't even touch him and just stops a few meters away. He coolly explains that it absorbs all the dark mana instead, leaving the mage completely stunned, wondering how someone like him can wield such scary power. With that, our guy gets ready to strike, saying it's none of the mage's business, and it really grinds his gears that he's got to use the power given to him by the one he hates the most. He knows he has to pull out his Death Knight moves to take down the guy in front of him. The mage starts to panic, thinking maybe that Aura Blade is some crazy sword technique meant only for sword masters. He freaks out and tells our guy to wait, but without hesitation, our guy just raises his sword and goes for it, aiming a soul-severing slash right at the mage's head. The hit is so intense that the mage gets sliced and even the cave behind him is falling apart. Our guy finishes off the bastard, looking cold as ice, while the whole place comes crashing down. As the dust settles, the mage is still alive but coughing hard. Damien tells him he'll ease the pain if he spills where the black snakes are hiding. Then the scene shifts to the merchant city where he's heading for some land work, and Victor asks what's up with that. Damien just tells him if he's coming along, he should keep it low-key. Victor takes a look at the book Damien's reading, which gives off some creepy vibes. It's a dark magic grimoire he snagged after taking out a dark mage. Victor, who might not be the smartest when it comes to reading, points out that dark magic grimoires are super dangerous and hard to come by. Suddenly, he catches a strange smell and wonders what it is. As they look around, still puzzled, they finally arrive at their destination. But then Damien hands Victor a little bag and says there's something he needs him to do. As he opens the box, he totally freezes when he sees the mage's head inside. Panic sets in, but our guy tries to calm him down with everyone watching. He promises to explain later, but insists he has something important to do for him first. He tells him he needs to deliver some stuff to a specific place to avoid any drama. Victor is still losing it. In a bit, our guy finds himself next to a tall building with 2 guards hanging around. He realizes these thug wannabes have set up shop right in the middle of the city, which makes the guards curious about who he actually is. So he introduces himself as Damien Haxon from Haxon's Viscounty. The guards start laughing at him, but then one of them realizes he's the guy their boss has been looking for. Damien is surprised they know him since he has some business with their boss. They tell him to head inside. One of the guards reloads his gun and fires a shot into the air, but it turns out to be a flare. He says it's a welcome gift for Damien. Before he knows it, our guy is surrounded by a whole bunch of minions ready for a fight. He just smirks and warns them they're gonna regret this. On the flip side, Landworks Governor Sebastian is having a blast, chilling with some girls and enjoying a ton of good food. His mic is also pretty wasted. Cedric is hanging out too, watching them have a good time and thinking it's a real privilege. But the governor thinks it's all about the merchants and doesn't mind if the Black Snakes take charge. He gives the go-ahead for them to run the red light district and is totally okay with it. When someone asks about the protests, he confidently says he can squash them anytime he wants. The knight jumps in, saying he wishes he could help out too. Cedric replies that keeping everything secure isn't a walk in the park, and gives the knight some compliments, which makes him feel good. Meanwhile, the governor, still enjoying girls around him, tells Cedric to reach out if they need any assistance. On the other hand, Cedric thinks he won't have to put up with these losers much longer because he plans to take over the whole city, and soon they'll be the ones bowing to him. One of his minions chimes in, saying he has something to share, and when asked what it is, he prepares to spill the news. As Cedric heads out, the minion whispers something that totally freaks him out, making him yell about Damien. He's furious, but also thinks it's kind of clever since he warned his crew ahead of time. He brushes off the minion, believing our guy just came here to meet his end. Meanwhile, before diving into the fight, Damien chugs down a potion that boosts his stamina and strength. Now he looks super badass and wastes no time going on a crazy slashing spree. He figures things usually don't go how people expect. Back in town, some dark mages are lurking around, and one of them thinks someone owes him a favor, so he tells everyone not to stress. Cedric was totally shocked, feeling something was off. Meanwhile, our guy had wiped out all of his minions without breaking a sweat. The boss was left wondering whether he really did it all by himself. He couldn't believe he was up against Damien Haxon, and his creepy minion confirmed it. There's a rumor that he's the Viscount's worthless son, but the boss had no idea he was this talented. He started freaking out, worried that the dark mage he had sent was also taken down. With all these thoughts racing in his head, he hurried back, realizing he needed backup. Our guy is totally confused when more minions show up, and he starts wondering if their stuff is magic. The minions get pumped and start firing off fireballs right at him, but he's ready to block them. He decides to take them on with his secret move, Countless Thunder Shadow Revelation. With his sword, he redirects the fireballs right back at the minions. When the strike hits, it's like a single blow takes them all out, and he thinks he might be done here. But then he wants to find out who the so-called Black Snake boss is. Out of nowhere, he barely dodges a punch that comes flying at him. Standing his ground, he notices that the guy has this intense look that feels like it's prickling his skin. The dude says he was wondering who caused all this chaos, and to him, our guy looks like just some overconfident punk. That's when he realizes this guy is probably an official knight. In no time, our guy is surrounded by soldiers who are supposed to keep the peace in the city. The governor pipes up, shouting about how dare he create such chaos right in the middle of everything. He says our guy is going to be punished, which makes him wonder what that even means and why. The governor, getting angrier, questions what kind of nonsense that is. Not only has he tried to take Cedric's life, but he also went after his crew and killed some employees. Cedric starts to realize that, no matter how tough our guy is, he can't really touch anyone under the governor's protection. But Damien just gestures to Cedric to make the first move. He figures Cedric has some serious loyalty issues and starts to mock the governor, calling him ridiculous for considering that guy a businessman. The governor responds, saying if he begs for forgiveness now, he might think about it. But Damien insists he hasn't done anything wrong. The governor, feeling like he has no options left, calls out Robert, who steps in with his axe ready to battle our guy. Robert introduces himself as the city's guardian knight and tells him to drop his weapon and submit to arrest. He thinks our guy's a bit of a weirdo since there's not a hint of fear in him, questioning whether he's brave or just plain dumb. But our guy is just super confident. Robert bursts out laughing and takes a wild swing at him, claiming he's just a fool. Our guy barely manages to dodge it. He realizes that taking Robert on at this moment won't be easy, so he decides to hang in there until the right moment comes. Seizing his chance, Robert tries to throw a punch, but our guy blocks it. Still, the force is strong enough to send him flying. He does his best to deflect it, but he still feels the hit. Our guy starts to wonder why she's still not around, and Robert doesn't hold back. He jumps right in, asking where she's looking. Robert's quick on his feet, but before he can do much, someone cuts in. His axe swings down, and everyone watches in shock as it slices through the air. Robert stops to figure out who she is, pulling his axe back down. She finally reveals her face, and boom, a really hot chick steps into the scene. Everyone's surprised to see she's a paladin. She calls out to our boy as young master, which makes him curious about why she's so late. Victor rushes in all pumped up, claiming he's arrived too. Cedric starts to think that the paladin is around, which means the church might be involved. He wonders if they already caught wind of his deal with the dark mages. Our guy tells Victor that he waited way too long for him, but at least it looks like he did what he asked. Victor is pretty stoked that he can handle orders, if nothing else. A few hours earlier at the church, Victor shows up, and the hot chick turns around to check him out. She asks if this is the branch of the Holy Church, and he says it is, asking her to listen up. He mentions that his lord wanted him to get something to the church ASAP, something related to proof of someone teaming up with the dark mages. The hot chick wants to see it, and when she checks the book, she confirms it's definitely dark magic. Then she spots the symbol, grabs the bag from Victor, and pulls out the head of the mage. That's when she realizes she's finally found one of the leaders of Yulan Agio. She takes off her veil, showing off some cool Cocomelon artwork, and asks where the person is who told her to expect this. Then she turns to our guy and asks if he's Damien, and he confirms it. She gets the proof she needs, and now the church is ready to step in. Cedric and the governor start freaking out since the Holy Church is in the mix now. The paladin girl praises our guy, understanding that everything is going as she thought it would. The Holy Church lives to serve God and is super generous to regular folks, but when it comes to heretics and demons, they won't hesitate to go all out. They're kind of fanatics. The church's enforcers are the paladins, and now they're backing Damien. The paladin girl then calls out to the citizens and soldiers, revealing they got a tip about someone who had a run-in with a dark mage. The citizen can't help but wonder how anyone could do business with those shady guys. The chick paladin jumps in, saying that if they dig into this, the church will take over the city. The governor starts freaking out, asking what she means since the land is allowed to govern itself. But she asserts that the church's authority is stronger than the kingdom's. The paladin, really fired up, calls him and his knight prime suspects, totally catching them off guard. She points to this guy, Cedric, claiming he's been working with the dark mage. She adds that just protecting him looks super suspicious. The governor yells at the boss, demanding to know if it's true. The paladin then reveals she has proof. She pulls out a notebook containing records of Cedric buying stuff for the dark mage. He's clenching his teeth in anger over the dark mage writing down all that info. He insists it's a misunderstanding and squeers he has nothing to do with the dark mage, but the fiery paladin says they'll get to the bottom of it. She tells her guys to take him away, and the church's enforcers escort him off. Our guy just stands there quietly, which really ticks off the governor, who thinks that jerk planned this all along. He thinks there's no way he's getting out of this, especially since he has no clue what these fanatics might do to him. Cedric yells at Robert, warning him that if he surrenders, those guys will totally set him up. He's shouting nonstop, which makes Robert pause for a sec. Then he decides to go all out, figuring that being taken like this means certain death. He grabs his axe and charges straight at the hot paladin, making Cedric really happy. But deep down, Robert knows he's messing up. He swings his axe, but she dodges it and nails him with a punch so hard it nearly goes through him. Everyone's jaws drop in shock, and all Robert can do is watch in silence. That punch goes right through him, and she yanks her arm back out, leading to Robert's immediate demise. The hot paladin then declares that anyone who disobeys God's will face punishment, God willing. Meanwhile, Governor Sebastian screams in shock and calls them fools as he's dragged away by the guards of the church. Victor is surprised to see Cedric, the infamous boss of the Black Snake, trembling. Unlike the rumors about him, he believes Cedric looks like a nobody. On the ground, Cedric can't believe that such a little brat like Damien put him in this position. Eventually, Damien admits that everything got settled properly because of Victor's help. Although he had guessed the paladin would be strong, he didn't realize she would be this strong. Based on the state of the sacred power he can detect off her, he suspects that she may be an apprentice of the famous Azure Flame. The Azure Flame Brigandine is the strongest person in the church and one of the 5 great saints. This man is well known for having taken down several heretics. Suddenly, the paladin calls out to Damien and approaches him. She expresses her gratitude to him for taking down an officer of Yulin, but our boy admits that he just did what anyone else would do. Because of his help, the paladin explains that he won't be charged with anything regarding this case. Confused, Damien asks her what she means by that, so she asks him if the reason he summoned the church wasn't to cover up his attack on the Black Snake. Her ability to see through his intentions surprises Damien, so he promptly apologizes to her if he had offended her. He explains that the Dark Mage cursed his territory but also tried to harm his family. However, the paladin seems surprised by his gesture. She adds that she cannot hold anything that happened here against him because of the circumstances surrounding it. Because of that, Damien realizes that she's more flexible than the public describes her. Furthermore, the paladin adds that they'll pay the bounty on Ajito's head to him as soon as possible. Surprised, our boy asks if there was a bounty and asks to know the amount. When he's told that it's 1,000 gold, Victor is shocked, and our boy realizes all that money is enough to buy a small castle. However, Damien has other plans, so he asks the paladin if he can receive something else from the church instead of the bounty. Behind him, Victor has to suppress himself from smacking him in the back of the head since he knows Damien has blown through a lot of money already. Confused, the paladin asks him what he wants in exchange, so our boy tells her he would like to have one of the mana cultivation techniques held by the church. That doesn't make sense to the paladin because she knows he's strong enough to take out the Black Snake himself, so she wonders what he wants to use a mana cultivation technique for. But after fighting the Dark Mage, Damien understood that he was lucky to win that fight because he had the power of the authority. However, to be able to defeat stronger enemies in the future and to reach higher levels, our boy knows he'd have to learn mana training techniques used by knights. He knows he'd have to learn something much more advanced compared to the one he's learned. Eventually, our boy explains to the paladin that he's only learned basic level techniques, so he would like to master something more advanced. However, this comes as a surprise to the paladin because it's odd that someone could reach this level of power with just basic cultivation techniques. She can sense a high level of aura flowing out of his body, and she realizes he must have out-of-this-world talent to be able to pull that off. After thinking for a while, the paladin considers Damien's passion to cut down heretics without hesitation, so she suggests a better way. When Damien asks her what she means, the paladin gladly asks him if he'd be interested in also becoming a paladin. She asks with such elegance that bright light seems to radiate out of her, but our boy doesn't seem to be feeling it. After hesitating for a moment, he bluntly tells her that he's not interested, and the lady collapses to the ground in despair. Eventually, she asks him why he's not interested, especially since becoming a paladin is the greatest honor given by God to allow others to punish evil in his name. When her eyes seem to glow in indignation, Victor begins to panic because he realizes they're toast. Annoyed, the paladin asks him if he knows how hard it is to get that position, but Damien doesn't seem to care for any of it. Damien knows that he's never had even a bit of religious faith, and the worst part is that he has no interest in being a dog for the church. Because he can't say that to her face, he tells her that he's not yet worthy of receiving the love of God. When he says that, Victor looks at him confused, wondering what his angle is. Eventually, with angelic radiance, our boy adds that he only wishes to travel the world now and follow the divine as a humble devotee. Behind him, Victor wonders if his master really believes he can get away with this obvious lie. Eventually, the paladin reacts. She jumps up and deems his words holy words that make her ears open anew. Immediately, both Victor and Damien are shocked that the lie worked. The paladin immediately tells Damien that he'll be given a mana cultivation technique instead of a bounty, but she adds that the door of the church is always open to receive him if he ever changes his mind. After that, the lady introduces herself as Agnes, the first apprentice of the Azure Flame. Damien is intrigued that she was the first one to be accepted by Azure Flame, so he tells her it's an honor to meet her. After that, our boy asks for permission to finish his business here, so Agnes allows him, unsure of what he's referring to. Damien immediately walks up to Cedric, who's still crouched on the ground. Cedric calls him the son of a B-word and threatens to take him down with him. Before the words fully come out of his mouth, our boy kicks him in his fat stomach, causing him to cough violently. While he's wheezing, Damien tells him his belly's so fat that it feels like punching a cushion. Before Cedric can react with another insult, our boy plants his foot in his face, knocking the man backwards until his head hits the ground. Cedric violently falls on his back while Agnes and Victor watch in shock. After doing that, a wave of satisfaction flows through Damien's body. Eventually, Victor asks the young master if all the trouble is finally over now, and Damien proudly tells him that it is, but he later adds that it's probable. Later on, at the home of the Marquis of the Lionbloom family, Erwin, the Marquis of the Apple Kingdom, Holland, bursts in to see him. When Holland enters, he finds his son, Erwin, cowering under the sheets, while the butler stands nearby. Annoyed, Holland grabs Erwin and demands to know what happened here. Erwin stutters but explains that a certain bastard tried to kill him. He adds that the guy held a fork to him, and Holland can't comprehend the sight of his cheerful child trembling in fear like this. Eventually, he turns to the guard, who's standing nearby, and demands to know who would do such a thing. The guard hesitates but eventually tells him that Damien of House Haxon is responsible for this. Annoyed, Holland smashes a nearby vase, and he can't believe that such a lowly Haxon would touch his son. He's certain that the boy must have used some cowardly trick, so he orders that people be sent to Haxon Estate immediately. He orders that the men drag Damien here like a dog. Shortly after, Agnes and some of her men go to the Haxon Estate and greet Viscount Haxon. After introducing herself, the Viscount and his wife welcome them. Viscount Haxon is immediately annoyed that his brat son has brought a fanatic into his house after causing trouble behind his back. Eventually, the Viscount informs Agnes that Damien already informed him that they'll be staying with him for a while. Agnes explains that it's a decision they made to investigate the heretic, and adds that they would appreciate his cooperation. However, the Viscount tries to counter that the house is pretty small, and they may not be able to offer them a proper room. Before he can finish his statement, Agnes thanks him for his generosity and hands him a bag full of gold as a token of their gratitude. Immediately, the Viscount changes his mind and tells them to make themselves at home. Later on, Agnes approaches Damien and thanks him for allowing the investigation team to conduct their work there. Meanwhile, our boy looks at his parents celebrating over the bag of money. Although Agnes had told him she had another request, Damien didn't really expect her to come to his house. However, he has no choice now. As if that is not enough, Agnes points out that this investigation is important, so she asks if she can ask for something else. Surprised, our boy asks what the request is, so Agnes confesses that it's about him. When the Viscount and his wife hear that, they're surprised and they turn around with awkward smiles, wondering what Agnes wants to know about Damien. Ticked off, Damien looks at them in annoyance because he knows it's not what they're thinking. Moments later, Agnes hands our boy the mana cultivation manuals he requested and explains that they were specially selected. Damien appreciates it, but he asks her why she decided to give him these two books. To answer that, Agnes explains that one of them is a sword technique manual, because it wouldn't feel right to give him a cultivation manual without a matching sword technique. Although Damien believes he doesn't really need sword techniques, he believes there's no harm in having it. The name of the sword manual is Destructive Sword Technique, and the other is the Destructive Energy Technique. After reading the names, Damien realizes he never encountered these manuals in his past life. Agnes confesses that it was difficult to acquire the books, so Damien thanks her once again. Oddly, Agnes repeats that it wasn't easy to get the books, especially because she encountered a lot of opposition from within the church. Damien acknowledges that again, so Agnes explains that she was able to get them by the authority of her master. Apparently, she told her master about him, and her master said that Damien is exactly the kind of chosen one the church needs. So once again, she excitedly grabs his hand and asks him if he would reconsider becoming a paladin. However, Damien pulls back his hand and apologizes. After some silence, Agnes tells him she understands and recognizes that she'll become discourteous if she pushes him further, but she adds that he shouldn't hesitate to come find her if he ever changes his mind. As she walks away, Damien realizes Agnes is really a fanatic because of her obsession. Meanwhile, two paladins from the church check out the cave where Egido was killed. One of them calls out to his partner and asks him if he doesn't find things a bit suspicious. When asked what he means, the guy explains that Egido is a high-ranking member of Yulin who has avoided being caught by the church many times. Even though Egido was a part of the curse school, which is weaker in combat, it still doesn't make sense that such a powerful dark mage would die at the hands of a rural noble. The other guy admits that he had the same concerns, but they can't do anything since Lady Agnes hasn't said anything about it. However, the first guy asks him if he doesn't think they should bring up their concerns with Agnes. The second guy agrees and proposes they'll do that after they conclude the investigation. While they're still chatting, Agnes creeps in from behind and tells them they can trust Damien Haxon. They're surprised to see her, but she further explains that she understands their doubts, but she knows Damien didn't lie. When one of the paladins adds that he still doesn't understand how he was able to kill Egido, Agnes points out that they already heard how he did it. They try to remember what she means, and they recall that Damien had said that he just dodged and cut off Egido's head. Surprised, the curious paladin asks Agnes if she believes he simply dodged and killed Egido, and she agrees. She explains that she also doubted Damien's skill when she saw Egido's severed head, so she stayed back to observe while Damien faced Robert and the other men, but she didn't intervene. Apparently, she witnessed how he fought dozens of men on his own without sustaining a single scratch. The part that shocked her was that he was able to deflect a fireball, which is a magical spell, with his sword. The paladins are shocked, and the curious one asks if that's even possible. Agnes admits that it is, especially since she has heard that people who have reached the level of Swordmaster can block attacks of all kinds, including magic. She admits that she's not saying he's a Swordmaster, but she can recognize that his skills are not ordinary. Although she majorly came there to pursue Yulin, she confesses that she also wanted to take Damien with them to meet her master. She believes he could become a great asset to the church. Because of that, she tells the men to lay their doubts aside and continue their investigation. Meanwhile, the men sent by Marquis Holland finally arrive at the Haxon estate. One of them, an apprentice mate of a house Lionbloom, Ulpis, is glad they're finally there. Another apprentice mate, Lavender, gets disgusted at the smell of cow dung, but Ulpis tells him he better get used to it. While they're chatting, their leader tells them both to be quiet. The man in front is named Garrick, the official knight of the Lionbloom family. Moments later, Garrick asks them if the building in front is the Haxon estate, and Ulpis affirms that it is. Garrick asks them what the mission of the Marquis was, and Ulpis recounts that it's to arrest Damien Haxon. Eventually, Garrick explains that catching the trash kid will be easy, but that won't make up for the humiliation he brought upon Master Irwin. Suddenly, Garrick notices an old man walking past them, so he calls out to him. The man turns to them and asks who they are, so Garrick asks him if he's a resident of the Viscount Haxon's estate. As Garrick unsheathes his sword, the old man says he lives there and asks them what all of this is about. With one swift move, Garrick sends the old man's head rolling. Annoyed, Garrick wonders how a mere resident would dare not to bow down after seeing the crest of the House Lionbloom. The knights behind are shocked, and they figure that the old man might have just been blind, but they don't say a word. Eventually, Garrick turns to the apprentice knights and tells them that he has a great idea. He proposes that they enter the estate, drag out Damien the Bastard, and then slaughter everyone they see. As they charge into the estate, the first person they run into is a frantic Victor, who was busy sweeping. Nearby, Agnes and her men come out of the cave after investigating. Because the site had partially collapsed, they were not able to get as much information as they had planned, but Agnes commends them for their good work. Suddenly, they notice something odd nearby and turn to see Damien practicing mana cultivation on a nearby rock. The sight alarms them, and they continue to watch him, unsure of what they're looking at. One of them confesses that he's not certain what is going on, but he knows it's incredible. Agnes is also surprised, and she recalls that the destructive energy technique that she gave Damien is a cultivation method that allows someone to absorb surrounding mana once mastered to an extreme level. However, she doesn't believe he was able to do that in just a few hours. Eventually, Damien stops cultivating and returns back to normal. He notices Agnes and one other paladin looking at him with such awe. Then he approaches them to ask if they've finished investigating. Excited, Agnes tells him she has, and she points out that it seems like he's been able to make some progress. Our boy explains that it's just a little progress, and he realizes that Agnes wasn't exaggerating, that this book was hard to get. Since he was a sword master in his past life, he doesn't really need sword techniques. However, the cultivation technique there is extremely useful to him. The destructive energy technique was created to account for the heavy mana consumption of the destructive sword technique. Because of that, it can gather mana faster than any other technique and can even temporarily draw in external mana. For a moment, they both stare into each other's eyes and an awkward silence lingers. When an odd romantic background develops, Damien literally tries to wave it away, and he quickly mentions that it's already time for dinner. Agnes looks away in shame, so our boy proposes that they head back in for dinner. Suddenly, Damien detects an intense bloodlust, so he states that some pests have arrived. Agnes looks at him in confusion, but our boy simply tells her he has to leave because he has urgent business to take care of. He asks her to head back when she's ready, and he runs away with unimaginable speed. One of the paladins confesses that Damien is very fast, and Agnes just continues to watch him speed off in awe. She realizes that Damien would have to have extreme precision to be able to move so quickly with a very small amount of mana. She really wonders how far his limits are. Meanwhile, Lavender plants a punch in Victor's stomach and knocks him to the ground. After the poor boy collapses to the ground, Lavender stomps his back and calls him a filthy bastard for defying him. He continues to stomp him and orders him to go in to bring Damien Haxon. However, Victor continues to take the beating but refuses to bring out Damien because he knows they're here to hurt him. Meanwhile, a maid quickly signals to the Viscount about what is going on, and he rushes out to meet the knights. The Viscount orders the men to stop immediately, and he quickly goes to Victor's side to check if he's alright. As he holds the boy's head, he demands to know what the meaning of what they're doing is. When he asks why a knight will assault a mere civilian, Garrick tells him this is nothing compared to what his estate has done to House Lionbloom. Immediately, Garrick tells Viscount Paul Haxon that Marquis Lionbloom demands that he hand over Damien Haxon. He tells him to hand over the boy quietly so his land won't suffer. Immediately, the Viscount recalls that he had expected some retaliation from Lionbloom, but he didn't know they'd be this barbarous. He also knows Garrick is lying because he's certain they'll set the place on fire if he hands over his son. Annoyed, the Viscount declares that he's never going to hand over his son. Intrigued, Garrick asks him if he's certain he won't regret his decision, and the Viscount tells him he won't. Since the Viscount is adamant, Garrick orders his knights to destroy everything in sight until Damien comes out. Shocked, the Viscount tells them to stop what they're doing at once. While he's still speaking, Damien shows up and asks the pests if they've lost their minds. With a destructive aura, Damien approaches them from behind and they turn around in shock. Garrick is surprised because he didn't know when the kid appeared, and when Damien walks closer, Lavender asks him who on earth he is. Suddenly, the apprentice knights are shocked when they realize that they're unable to move. Damien ignores them and goes to ask his father if he's alright. Damien soon learns that Victor has been injured, and he tells the men that they must have been born lucky. He explains that Victor has such a sturdy body and would have died from the beating they gave him if that weren't the case. In that case, he definitely would have beaten the three of them to death on the spot. Shocked, Ulpis calls Damien a bastard, and Garrick tells Damien he must be a madman to have the guts to defy the Marquis. However, he feels the kid might just be arrogant because he was able to defeat Erwin with some underhanded trick. Garrick immediately orders his knights to crush Damien's knees and make him kneel before him, so they both rush into action. As Lavender rushes in to strike Damien with his sword, our boy simply grabs his hand and pushes his hand backwards. He considers that this situation is perfect because he's been looking for a way to test the mana he got from the destructive energy technique. With one movement, he breaks Lavender's arm and lands a punch in his chest. The punch sends the poor knight flying backwards, and Ulpis watches in total shock. Before he can respond, he's met by a foot that embraces his face, launching him backwards and knocking loose some teeth. Damien is glad that he'll be able to test his power out without restraint. As both knights fall to the ground in pain, Garrick looks slightly surprised. Suddenly, Victor opens his eyes and calls out to the young master. Damien turns to him and asks him if he's alright, but Victor only smiles and gives a thumbs up. That gesture makes Damien smile, and he realizes the boy never ceases to surprise him. Eventually, Garrick steps down from his high horse and mentions that he doesn't understand how a rascal like Damien can have such skills. Damien tells him there's no need to know, and eventually Garrick mentions that he's figured it out. He explains all the pieces of the puzzle fit now, and he proclaims that this person isn't Damien Haxon. Viscount Paul wonders what on earth this guy is blabbering about, and Damien asks him the same thing. Annoyed, Garrick tells him not to lie to him because it's clear that this is a trap set by the field dogs to stop the lion blooms from prospering. He insists that this isn't the real Damien, and our boy looks at him perplexed. Garrick insists that he's an imposter who was hired to defeat Lord Irwin and destroy the good name of House Lionbloom, so he begins to unsheath his sword. Still unimpressed, Damien realizes this guy is dumber than he thought. Meanwhile, Ulpus wonders what he should do. To avoid more trouble, he decides to pretend that he's knocked out for the time being. Before the fight begins, the Viscount helps Victor up and Victor wishes the young master wins. As he unsheathes his weapon, Garrick realizes his opponent seems skilled, but he believes he's run out of luck. Because he has a circle of mana around him, he knows that he'll split him in half immediately if he takes half a step and enters into his range. Immediately, Damien steps forward and Garrick swings to cut his head off, but our boy blocks it by raising his sword. As Garrick's sword meets his, our boy smirks. He's glad that he gets to fight a proper knight, just as he had expected of Lionbloom. Garrick is forced to retreat and he can't believe that this guy was able to block his attack. He believes it must have been a fluke, so he goes in for another attack to see how he'll manage to block it. Immediately, he attacks Damien with several strikes, but our boy blocks them all without moving away. With a cocky expression, Damien tells Garrick he's too slow and decides to return the favor. Damien dashes forward for his own attack and cuts Garrick's face with great speed. Garrick attempts to block the attacks, but he's injured because he can't see Damien's attacks. Before he can react, he gets a kick to the face that sends him rolling like a ball. After he collapses to the ground, our boy looks at him with murderous eyes and tells him that one was for Victor. Annoyed, Garrick manages to get back up and calls him a bastard. With great rage, he charges at Damien, but our boy doesn't flinch. Garrick uses an ultimate technique called the Ultimate Lion's mighty sword of speed, and destructive claws appear to tear whoever is in the way. This amuses Damien, but he explains that there's nothing special to the technique but how it looks. As Garrick closes in, our boy blocks the tip of his sword with his own. The impact causes an explosion that shatters Garrick's sword immediately, allowing Damien to pierce his shoulder and slice his hand off. The big man screams in excruciating pain as he collapses to the ground. As the man collapses, the Viscount looks at his son in surprise. Meanwhile, Victor bares his fist in excitement because his master won. Immediately, Garrick tries to apply pressure to his wound. While he's still doing that, Damien's sword crosses his face. As sweat rolls down his face, Garrick confesses he doesn't know who he is but pleads to be spared. To reiterate, Damien calls him an idiot and tells him that he is Damien Haxon. He informs Garrick that he should have begged for his life before he messed with his family and made his ugly servant uglier. Scared, Garrick apologizes for all that he did. However, Damien tells him he's not the one he's supposed to apologize to, so Victor appears with a stick, while Viscount Paul holds a sword nearby. After whooping Garrick and his knights a bit more, Victor asks if he can hit Garrick a bit more because he's still not satisfied. However, Damien tells him it's enough because he could die if they hit more than this. When Victor suggests cutting off 1 or 2 more limbs, Damien begins to consider it. Before they do anything, the Viscount tells Damien it's enough. Immediately, Garrick pleads with the Viscount and apologizes for all the disrespect he's shown. However, the Viscount asks him if he really thinks a single apology is going to atone for what they did. He points out that they would have destroyed his entire territory if his son didn't have this much strength. Moreover, they would have dragged him away by the Marcus family to suffer for something random. Garrick immediately headbutts the ground and pleads for mercy. After a moment of hesitation, the Viscount looks at Damien. Inside of him, Damien admits that he never actually intended to kill them because killing them would ruin their relationship with the House Lionbloom. If it was just him, he could easily fight the Marcus family, but he doesn't want to bring his family into this. But he also knows they'll retaliate soon if he lets them go like this. While he wonders what he should do, Agnes enters the estate and asks to know what happened. When our boy sets his eyes on her, he realizes she can be helpful once again. After explaining all that had happened to her, Agnes explains that she can be of help. When our boy asks if she has an idea, she explains that they've been able to take out one of the Yulin's executive officers for the first time because of House Haxon. With that, they can recognize House Haxon as an allied household. That sounds great to Damien and the Viscount because they may be able to escape this crisis, but Victor doesn't seem to be following yet. Eventually, our boy uses his puppy eyes on her and asks if she would accept their request if it's not too much, so Agnes gladly accepts. Inside of him, Damien smirks because getting the protection of the church was exactly what he was gunning for all along. Meanwhile, the Viscount and Victor realize that Damien just used his looks to seduce the lady. Immediately, Damien tells Garrick to go report to Lambloom's that House Haxon is under the protection of the church. If they try to use force on them again, they'll have to fight against the church. When he tells them to get lost, all 3 men run away frantically. Victor waves his stick at them and tells the men to count themselves lucky. Victor is glad they can finally rest, But the Viscount explains that they have to figure out what to do next. He adds that they have to hold a family meeting. Moments after, the meeting begins and Agnes stands nearby as the family sits for their meeting. The Viscount informs them that this meeting is about the feud they have with House Lion Bloom. Before he continues, Abel raises his hand and asks his father why they need to do anything since they've secured the church's protection. Immediately, Louise explains to Abel that they can't expect the church to completely intervene in this problem. Viscount Paul agrees with Louise and adds that the church doesn't get deeply involved in matters that concern nobles. Moreover, he adds that the power of the Lion Bloom family isn't just in their military strength. If they really wanted to, they could crush small, noble families like theirs in many ways. He clarifies that their most realistic option is to offer them some payment or seek protection from a higher-ranking noble. He believes the best shot they have to enter is to get protection from a great house, but Agnes points out that there may be another way. The men look at her, and Agnes gladly declares that Sir Damien could become a paladin. That radiance that accompanies her expressions appears again, but Damien just frowns on his seat. He didn't expect her to bring that up now, and when his family turns to him, Damien tells them he doesn't want to. Agnes crawls back into her despair, so the Viscount agrees that it's off the table since Damien doesn't want it. Suddenly, Abel slams the table in annoyance and asks his father why he easily accepts that since Damien can easily make all this go away by becoming a paladin. He asks his father to just tell Damien to just become a paladin, but he actually hopes not to have to see his brother again since he's always been a pain in his behind. When he mentions that, Agnes rejoices again in hope. Damien frowns and he realizes his brother is running his mouth like all of this is none of his business. When Abel insists that all of this started because of Damien, the Viscount reminds him they have a guest and tells him to sit down while he's asking nicely. A murderous aura appears behind the Viscount and Abel quickly sits down while he can. Eventually, Viscount Paul admits that Abel is right that Damien caused this conflict with the Lion Blooms, but it's not entirely his fault. He points out that Erwin Lion Bloom had lustful intentions toward Louise and Erwin wouldn't have given up so easily if Damien hadn't acted. He believes that Damien did what he did to protect Louise from the Marquis' second son, since he's a powerless father. The statement distresses Marilda and causes tears to roll down Louise's face. Eventually, the Viscount stands up with tears in his eyes and tells Damien that he stood up against the insult against their family and repaid them properly. Damien looks up at him because he hadn't expected him to feel this way. Eventually, he tells his father he had to do it, but Abel just snickers. The Viscount tells Damien he'll take care of this matter from here on, and when Damien attempts to protest, the Viscount tells him not to worry and let him act like a proper father for once. Suddenly, a butler enters and informs the Lord that someone from House Gold Pixie has arrived. That intrigues the Viscount, and he wonders what business the Duke has with them. The butler begins to stutter and explains that young Master Damien borrowed money using the family's wheat fields as collateral, but the repayment period has passed. Damien realizes he's in trouble, and he turns to look at his father, whose veins are now bulging. Before he can move, soon after, Damien steps out to meet their guest. The man greets Damien, but our boy realizes he vaguely remembers this guy. The man gladly tells him that it's been a while since they've met, but he came to collect the repayment since this is the date they agreed upon. This man is named Olin Mishi, and he's in charge of finances for the West Branch of the Dash and Cash business. Our boy remembers how Olin used sweet words to convince him to use his family's land as collateral so he can get more money. Olin said it was just a formality and there's nothing to worry about because a lowborn like him can't take land from a noble like him. Damien regrets why the Damien from the past would ever hand over the deed to the land to them, so he asks them how much he owes. Immediately, Olin explains that he borrowed 200 gold and he now owes them 300 gold because of the interest. Our boy almost breaks his jaw and he asks if the amount is correct, so Olin asks if he would like to see the contract. The funny thing is that it was such a long time ago that our boy doesn't even remember why he borrowed the money, but he knows that his family doesn't have that kind of money at the moment. At this rate, his entire family will be tossed onto the streets and left to beg for money. Olin reminds him that the land he used as collateral will become the property of Dash and Cash if he's unable to repay the money that day. Surprised, Damien reminds him that he said that the collateral was just a formality. The man agrees that he did, but there's nothing he can do because Duke Gold Pixie ordered them to collect all available debts. Olin asks him to go bring the money, and with some excitement in his eyes, he asks him if he doesn't have it. Eventually, Damien explains that he wasn't able to prepare the repayment, and that makes Olin smile. Excited, Olin has a seat on one of the chairs and points out that he shouldn't have borrowed money in the first place. He signals to the hefty men who came with him and tells them to collect things his own way. The men surround Damien and Olin considers that he knew that the kid would be unable to pay. Although he likes money, he enjoys being able to rough people up like this more. He loves seeing these arrogant nobles kiss his feet as they plead with him. He wonders what kind of face this young master will make, and he almost erupts in pleasure imagining it. Meanwhile, Viscount Paul and Abel pace around in distress while the ladies drink tea. Marilda tries to tell her husband to sit down and rest because he'll bore a hole in the ground if he keeps pacing like that, and Louise tries to calm Abel down too. However, the Viscount almost tears his head off and asks his lady how he can possibly sit still when their family might be ruined. Abel does the same thing, and it's clear that it's like father, like son. Regardless, Marilda tells them Damien said he'll take care of it, so she proposes they have some trust in him and wait. Louise says the same thing and reminds them that Damien has never failed them whenever he stepped up. However, Viscount Paul explains that that's only because the kid has exceptional swordsmanship, but that's completely different from having negotiation skills. Meanwhile, Damien smashes the head of one of the men into the ground in the living room. After taking the two of them down, Olin jerks up in shock. As our boy picks up the unconscious guard, he realizes his father is going to lose it when he realizes he's destroyed the ground again. Next up, the second guard attacks him with a sword, but our boy enhances his hand with mana and grasps his throat. With one hand, he lifts the huge man off the ground and asks him how he would dare draw his sword on a noble. Since they drew their sword on him, he smiles at Olin and explains that this is just self-defense. Olin trembles in the chair and Damien approaches him after taking the two men down. When Damien approaches him, he explains that he can't repay that amount of money at the moment. Olin agrees that it's totally fine, so Damien grabs him and offers to repay him some other way. The next day, Abel tells his father that he's quite heartbroken because justice was defeated by violence. Meanwhile, Louise and Marilda wish Damien a safe trip and remind him to ensure he eats properly. Abel collapses in devastation, demanding to know why this is happening, but his father tells him to stop his nonsense and go cheer up his brother on his journey. The Viscount reluctantly agreed to this, but he's still unsure if Damien's plan will actually work. Moments after, Agnes tells Damien that it's a pity that they're already parting. Our boy approaches her and thanks her for all her help. She admits she only did what she had to and explains they plan to leave tomorrow since they've finished their investigations. Before he leaves, Agnes expresses her hope that his journey is blessed and he thanks her. She immediately reminds him that he can reach out if he changes his mind, but he immediately tells her he won't before she finishes her statement. After shattering her heart, he walks towards the carriage to go meet Victor, and Victor explains that he's already loaded the luggage. Once they're inside, Victor becomes very excited because of how large the carriage is. Meanwhile, Olin welcomes them to the carriage and assures them that he'll ensure nothing affects them during this journey. Our boy agrees that he has a good attitude, so he asks that they're served lobster for lunch. They soon signal the driver and set out on their journey to House Gold Pixie. Damien and the others arrived at the grand mansion of House Gold Pixie, where Damien stood with Victor and the envoy before the large building. Damien gazed at the mansion and admitted to himself that House Gold Pixie's estate truly deserved its grand reputation. Damien smiled and told the envoy that he would not forget that things had gone so smoothly thanks to his help. The envoy replied that he had informed the Duke of Damien's arrival and that he could enter immediately. Back in the carriage, the envoy was quietly sulking, internally complaining about his bad luck and his frustration with Damien's treatment of him. He continued blaming Damien in his mind, resenting him for making him suffer like this when he could have stayed comfortably in his usual position. The envoy told himself that he hoped things would go smoothly and that he would not end up dead, though deep down he was hoping for quite the opposite. Damien then smiled at Victor and told him that he would be back soon. Victor agreed enthusiastically to his young master's words. Damien entered the mansion where someone inside asked if he truly was Damien Haxon. Duke Adam Gold Pixie appeared, clearly asking if Damien was really a Haxon family's son he had heard so much about. Damien thanked him for acknowledging him and admitted to himself that he had come for a very specific purpose. The Duke told Damien bluntly that someone named Dimitri had told him he was looking for him and asked him directly about the reason. Damien calmly admitted to the Duke that he had borrowed money from the Duke's loan office and that the repayment deadline was approaching. He explained that unfortunately, he didn't currently have the funds to pay it back but wished to repay the debt in a different way. Damien clearly declared before Duke Adam Gold Pixie that he would defeat House Lion Bloom and that his victory over them would serve as repayment for the debt he owed. The Duke and those around him were stunned by Damien's sudden statement. The Duke laughed, saying that Damien had probably heard the rumors and that's why he had come to them at this particular time. Even the Knight Ghoul Heinrich agreed with the Duke. Damien began to think seriously about the current situation, nodding to himself that he had indeed heard the rumors recently about the discovery of a large gold mine on the border. A conflict had erupted between House Lion Bloom and House Gold Pixie over control of the mine, and duels between low-ranking knights had already begun to determine ownership. Damien realized that he already knew how these duels would likely end, and he predicted that House Lion Bloom would win decisively. He visualized a clear image of House Lion Bloom's victory and anticipated that such a win would rapidly expand their influence. At the same time, House Gold Pixie would begin to lose its power little by little. Damien concluded internally that if he could help Duke Adam Gold Pixie secure victory, he would be able to repay his debt entirely. He added to himself that doing so would also allow him to reign in House Lion Bloom, achieving 2 goals at once. Duke Gold Pixie smiled with deep interest, asking Damien if he truly had the courage to challenge the noble House of Lion Bloom and destroy one of its key organizations. Damien replied with a calm smile, saying that such a notion was not far from reality at all. The Duke smiled and told Damien that he was currently having a hard time finding a suitable knight for the upcoming duel. Damien confidently assured the Duke that he was the ideal candidate for the task, explaining that no low-ranking knight other than himself could stand up to Lion Bloom's eldest son. The Duke asked Damien if he truly believed he could defeat Michael Lion Bloom, who was renowned for his exceptional dueling skills. Damien smiled with unwavering confidence and answered that he was fully aware of Michael Lion Bloom's abilities, but he would never lose to him. Ernst Hovitz immediately interjected, warning the Duke not to believe everything Damien said and pointing out that rumors were often exaggerated. Hovitz then continued, saying that Lady Chelsea would surely return soon with a knight suited for the duel. He added that Lady Chelsea had left some time ago in search of a worthy knight to face Michael Lion Bloom. Hovitz affirmed that her return was expected shortly, and that he was confident in her ability to find an outstanding duelist. Hovitz and the other knights smiled with great confidence when the Duke confirmed their remarks. Damien noticed that Hovitz was starting to sabotage things for him and mentally described him as being like a bone chewed by an orc, nothing but an obstacle to his plan. The Duke sat at his desk and remarked thoughtfully that he was now wondering what to do in this kind of situation. Damien sensed that the Duke was testing him, wanting to see how he would respond in such a scenario. Damien resolved that he had to prove himself through actions and not just words, and he clearly announced to the Duke that everyone was making a huge mistake. He spoke with complete confidence, telling Hovitz that if the Duke truly wanted to win the duel, he needed to choose Damien as his representative. There was no other knight capable of facing him. Hovitz was stunned by Damien's boldness and asked angrily if he even knew who Lady Chelsea was bringing as a challenger. Damien smiled again and calmly offered to let Hovitz try landing a single strike on him if that would ease his concerns. Hovitz's face twisted in anger and disbelief at Damien's bold and unexpected suggestion, while Damien continued to smile calmly. Hovitz asked the Duke for permission to demonstrate his skills to Damien. The Duke agreed, feeling the atmosphere grow increasingly intense and exciting. Damien and Hovitz then proceeded to the dueling grounds to begin their match. Victor was struck with intense shock and worry, wondering in disbelief what Damien was doing now, while Damien simply replied that things had turned out this way without any planning on his part. Victor grew increasingly anxious and tense as he watched the knight standing before Damien, while the knight's aura flared around him with a terrifying and menacing energy. Duke Gold Pixie gave a clear order to Hovitz to begin the attack immediately, and Hovitz agreed with calm confidence. Hovitz stepped forward powerfully and firmly, addressing Damien with a mocking tone, telling him that if he begged now, perhaps he might spare him. But Damien responded coldly, yawning and telling Hovitz to hurry up with his attack because he was starting to feel sleepy. This greatly provoked the knight, and he launched forward with immense power, his energy-coated sword rushing toward Damien at great speed, shouting that he would end this with a single blow. But Damien appeared perfectly calm and confident, though he began to wonder inwardly if he might have provoked Hovitz a bit too much. The knight screamed in fury as he charged at Damien, declaring that he would smash his arrogant face with one strike. Damien effortlessly dodged the first attack, inwardly acknowledging that Hovitz's combat skills were indeed fitting for a mid-rank knight. However, Damien affirmed to himself that if he could pinpoint the attack's direction precisely, deflecting it wouldn't be difficult at all. Hovitz delivered a powerful and sudden blow, but Damien easily blocked the dangerous attack. Damien's sword began to crack visibly from the force of the block. Hovitz suddenly gave a very sly smile, wondering to himself whether Damien had truly fallen into his trap that easily. In a surprise move, Hovitz launched a lightning-fast strike that landed directly on Damien, causing him to scream in pain as blood splattered from his body. Victor and Duke Gold Pixie screamed in horror together as they witnessed Damien suffer a sudden and serious injury. Damien dashed forward with incredible speed after taking the hit. Shock and disbelief appeared on Hovitz's face as he wondered anxiously to himself whether Damien had truly endured the sudden attack he delivered. Duke Gold Pixie turned toward the knight beside him and called him Protector, while the knight listened attentively, ready to hear what the Duke had to say. Damien pointed toward the Duke and confidently declared that the position of the Duke's representative now belonged to him. Victor rushed toward Damien, calling out loudly to his young master in excitement. Victor then hugged him tightly, leaving Damien visibly surprised. Damien asked Victor with concern if he was okay, while Victor held on to him, asking how he had managed to dodge the attack without being harmed. Damien smiled calmly and told Victor with full confidence that he had already said he would be hurt. Duke Gold Pixie joined the conversation, expressing his amazement and great admiration at Damien's success in defending against Hovitz's attack. The Duke admitted he had been somewhat skeptical at first, but now he was convinced that Damien's combat skills were real and exceptional. The Duke smiled and said that Damien was truly a great asset to them after seeing the abilities he had just demonstrated. He then stood up and officially announced before all his guards that Damien Haxon had proven himself excellently, and that, as previously promised, he would appoint him as his official representative. Hovitz, greatly concerned, tried to nervously object to the Duke's decision. The Duke cut him off firmly and with visible anger, telling the knight to stop immediately because he was in a good mood and did not want it ruined. The knight responded hesitantly and with obvious fear, saying he understood and would no longer object. Damien stood calmly before everyone while Hovitz felt deeply frustrated, admitting internally that he had been absolutely certain his strike had landed. Damien turned toward Hovitz and told him he was now being scolded by the Duke and that while his skills were not bad, he had chosen the wrong person to challenge. Damien continued speaking with calm confidence, explaining that he had already surpassed the level of a mid-tier knight and had become even stronger. He noted to himself that it was necessary to display that strength now, especially since only mid-tier nobles were allowed to participate in the duel. Damien admitted that if he hadn't used mana at that critical moment, then things could have become extremely dangerous. Duke Gold Pixie stood silently in front of Damien, staring at him thoughtfully and with deep consideration. The Duke noticed the internal injuries in Damien and told him that he could not ignore his current condition. The Duke then suddenly pulled out a strange ring, surprising Damien and prompting him to wonder whether it was a magical item that allowed storage. From the magical device, the Duke withdrew a small box and handed it to Damien, telling him it was a personal gift. Damien opened the box, which radiated magical energy. Inside were small spheres known as balance orbs. The Duke explained to Damien that these orbs were typically used by knights during training, and they were also very effective for healing internal injuries. Damien thanked him quietly for the valuable gift. The Duke smiled and told Damien that he would be counting on him from now on. Damien responded with a confident smile and told him that he would do everything he could. The next day, the Gold Pixie estate appeared bright under the sunlight as Damien walked quietly through its courtyard, placing a hand on his chest. Damien noticed that his internal wounds had nearly healed completely in just one night, admitting the effectiveness of the orbs given to him by the Duke. He also found that the Duke had excellent training equipment, and Damien decided that he would begin training with it from now on. Then someone approached and asked if he was Damien Haxon. Damien replied that the man was correct, then asked for his identity. The man introduced himself as Pavel Vermin and said that these individuals with him were his comrades in arms. Knight Pavel Vermin stepped forward enthusiastically with two of his fellow knights, declaring that they too would be participants in the upcoming duel. Damien was slightly surprised by the sudden appearance of these knights and asked in confusion if they were also participating. Pavel answered him in a proactive tone, stating that they indeed were going to participate in the duel. He explained that Damien was very lucky. They were absent yesterday due to external training. Pavel added confidently that if they had been present, they would have handled him instead of Knight Hovitz. Pavel continued telling Damien that the duel with House Lion Bloom was a critical matter for the Duke's family, and warned him not to hinder the knights with his poor skills. He firmly added that if Damien understood the situation clearly, then he should step aside so they could begin their training. Damien moved slightly to the side, deciding internally that he was very eager to watch the Duke's knights demonstrate their combat skills. One of the knights launched a special technique called the High Rise of the Bird, loudly announcing his attack with great energy and enthusiasm. At the same moment, another knight launched a similar attack alongside his comrade, escalating the duel between them even further. The knight shouted while charging at his opponent, expressing his determination to win this 98th duel, but his opponent replied loudly and mockingly, questioning who had decided he would be the victor this time. The knight appeared pained as he took a hit from his opponent and staggered slightly backward. Then, unexpectedly, Knight Pavel Vermin dashed forward with immense strength and landed a fast, decisive strike on his opponent. His opponent was utterly shocked by the sudden blow, his face filled with disbelief. As he was about to take the hit, he said that this was just what one would expect from Pavel. He then added that Pavel had read his attack and blocked it effortlessly using only his forehead. The duel ended, and his opponent admitted that he had learned something new today thanks to sparring with Pavel. Pavel then proposed that they end the match in a draw, given his opponent's clear improvement. A large knight approached Pavel with great enthusiasm and told him that his body was burning with excitement for a duel, asking him to fight him next. In the background, two other knights discussed the upcoming duel with House Lion Bloom, affirming that if they continued to train seriously, the results would be very promising. The other knight agreed and declared confidently that they would eventually defeat House Lion Bloom and elevate the honor and standing of the Duke's family. The three knights raised their swords high and shouted together with enthusiasm the phrase, "All for one," then followed in unison, and "One for all," demonstrating their unity, determination, and excitement for the upcoming battle. Damien and Victor stood silently at a distance, watching the passionate display without uttering a word. Victor, deeply puzzled, asked Damien why he was standing there silently, wondering who these suddenly appearing, highly spirited people were. Damien, feeling disappointed, told Victor that it looked like they had already lost the duel. Victor was completely shocked by Damien's unexpected words and nervously asked what he meant by that. Damien calmly and plainly explained that he simply did not have enough confidence in their ability to beat those highly motivated knights. Duke Gold Pixie appeared, laughing loudly and expressing how impressed he was by the knights' incredible enthusiasm, though he could not help but poke a little fun at how far their energy had gone. He told the large knight beside him that there was no need to hide his opinion, and that he could speak honestly about how he felt. The large knight replied bluntly that he did not really care about it at all. In a flashback to the previous night, Damien had apologized to Duke Gold Pixie and thanked him for his offer, but explained that he preferred to train alone. The Duke laughed and said that Damien was truly an interesting person, especially after rejecting the guidance of the senior knight Heinrich. He then asked Heinrich for his opinion of Damien. Knight Heinrich responded saying that Damien was an impressive individual and that there were not many people capable of deploying a magical barrier in a split second to avoid a fatal blow. Duke Gold Pixie sat at his large desk and asked the knight beside him for his expectations regarding the outcome of the upcoming duel, wondering if they truly had a chance of defeating House Lion Bloom. The knight responded cautiously, clearly hesitant, saying that he could not give a definitive or certain answer at this time. He then explained to the Duke that the duel would consist of 3 participants from each side and victory would go to the team that won 2 out of 3 matches. He emphasized that even if Damien performed well, that alone would not guarantee total victory. Duke Gold Pixie agreed, saying what he said was true, and added that the rest of the knights would also need to perform well in the duel. He then asked about the progress of the training being overseen by mid-tier knights. Vincenzo, another knight, responded with clear confidence, telling the Duke that he probably need not worry about that matter. Outside, Damien stood quietly, watching the rest of his team as they trained. He observed the 3 knights from a distance and noticed that their energy was dropping rapidly and that their skills were not what he had expected. He thought to himself that they would surely fail if they continued at this pace. Damien sighed and told himself that he had no choice but to step in and help them a little with their training. He called out to the 3 knights standing there in a clear voice. The 3 knights turned to him quickly, slightly surprised by how suddenly he addressed them. Damien smiled and asked them to dare to engage in a training duel with him just once. Pavel smiled confidently and told Damien he was very bold to even think of challenging them, especially after having seen their skills earlier. Damien replied with strong confidence, saying that he accepted their challenge, but that he wanted to face all of them at once. The 3 knights froze in place, stunned by the sheer audacity of Damien's bold statement. Pavel shouted furiously, demanding how an arrogant fool like Damien could dare challenge all of them at the same time. Damien stepped forward calmly and confidently, clearly stating that although challenging 3 knights had once violated chivalry rules, such rules did not apply to those he considered mere rabid dogs. The 3 knights charged at Damien in fury, launching a fierce simultaneous attack and calling him a bastard. Despite the rapid and coordinated attack, Damien remained perfectly calm, standing in place without moving an inch. Suddenly, one of the knights saw the world upside down. Pavel found himself lying on the ground without even realizing what had happened to him. Pavel looked around in confusion, deeply shaken as he tried to understand what was going on. Moments later, both Pavel and his other comrade found themselves lying on the ground as well, completely stunned and without any understanding of what had occurred. Pavel slowly opened his eyes only to hear Damien's calm voice asking if he had finally woken up. He looked up in shock to see Damien standing over him and heard him mockingly say that he was still as weak as ever. Damien then issued a clear threat, telling Pavel that if he ever caused another incident like this, he would see something else entirely. Pavel was utterly stunned as scattered memories began returning to him. Damien calmly explained that what happened was not an incident. It was simply a lesson he had intended to teach the Duke's knights. Pavel slowly recalled what had happened and realized that he and his 2 comrades had indeed attacked Damien together. He remembered the moment when the 3 knights charged Damien. In that memory, Pavel saw that Damien had countered them with extreme ease, without any real effort. He had knocked them down one by one. He struck Pavel directly in the face, causing him to lose consciousness. He then sent him flying through the air. Pavel stood in complete shock, asking himself in disbelief whether Damien had truly defeated all of them that easily, while his 2 comrades behind him appeared utterly demoralized. Pavel was gripped by intense fear as he stared at Damien in utter disbelief, wondering to himself what kind of monster stood before him, especially since Damien showed no signs of fatigue or exhaustion. Damien looked calmly at Pavel and his 2 comrades and asked clearly who was responsible for training them. Pavel, still kneeling on the ground and clearly flustered, replied that their trainer was the mid-tier knight Sebastian Vincenzo. Damien repeated the question in surprise, confirming if their instructor was indeed Sebastian Vincenzo, and Pavel nodded quietly in response. Damien's expression turned to one of clear displeasure as he seriously questioned whether Vincenzo had truly trained them in such a poor manner. He added that if he could simply tell him to stop, he would, but he did not want to start unnecessary conflict. Damien then told the three knights that once their training with Vincenzo ended each day, they were to report to the courtyard and train personally with him. Pavel hesitated, afraid of what might happen to them if they returned injured from the training and worried about Vincenzo's reaction, but Damien reassured them clearly that it was nothing they needed to worry about. Then Damien smiled with full confidence and told them that no matter how much they got hit, he guaranteed they would not suffer a single wound or scratch. Pavel was deeply shocked as he examined himself carefully, wondering how Damien had hit him earlier without leaving a single mark. Damien approached with a chilling expression and calmly explained that the reason was simply because he had learned a long time ago how to hit people in a professional and precise manner. Damien began to recall distant memories of a man known as the personal corrector who traveled across the continent disciplining criminals and correcting their behavior. Damien explained inwardly that this man's method was very simple. He would beat the criminals for 1 full hour, and if their behavior had not changed after the first hour, he would then double the beating duration and sometimes continue for extremely long periods. Damien continued his memories, stating that this man began to feel deep pity for the criminals who endured brutal beatings. Because of that, the man sought a way to beat them without endangering their lives. Eventually, he mastered a highly refined level of technique later known as Pretend Death Kill, a very advanced combat style. Damien admitted to himself that this was precisely the technique he had just used on the three knights. It inflicted severe pain without leaving any visible trace. He turned back to the three knights, telling them they should now fully understand their true level of weakness. Pavel reluctantly agreed, visibly ashamed and discouraged, admitting that they really were as weak as Damien had said. Damien then continued with a sarcastic smile, telling them not to worry too much because they still had a full month before the anticipated duel. He assured the knights that in that short time he would transform them from mere weak insects into useful insects. The three knights were utterly stunned by Damien's unexpected words and stared at him in complete disbelief. At that moment, someone called out to Damien clearly, telling him that he had arrived. Damien turned quietly to see the Marquis's servant approaching him quickly, causing him to wonder internally whether this man was truly the Marquis's servant. The Marquis's servant approached Damien and informed him that the Marquis was requesting to see him immediately. Damien calmly asked why the Marquis wanted him at this time. The servant quickly and clearly explained that Princess Chelsea had just returned, in a regal presence, officially announcing her return. She then went to greet the Duke, telling him that it had been a long time since they last met. She bowed to her father and told him that she had finally returned from her mission. Hobbits was visibly happy about Princess Chelsea's return. Duke Gold Pixie responded to Chelsea, saying it had been a full month since she left on her mission and asked her if she had found a suitable knight to participate in the competition. Princess Chelsea looked toward the knight and answered confidently that she had indeed found him. The low-ranking knight Gillen Blackwing stepped forward and introduced himself in a loud voice as the wild beast, carrying an imposing presence. The other knights were surprised and began whispering among themselves, admitting that they knew him well as a famous free knight. The knights discussed Gillen Blackwing's reputation, mentioning that he had participated in the conflict within the kingdom of Ekin, and had carried out a massacre against other low-ranking knights. They continued, confirming that his fame was widespread and that he had no rival among the knights of his class. Duke Gold Pixie looked toward Gillim and said he had heard quite a lot about him already. Willem confirmed to the Duke that his reputation had even reached the Apple Kingdom. Princess Chelsea stepped forward and informed the Duke that Sir Gillen Blackwing had pledged his loyalty to her and had promised to take part in the upcoming duel. She smiled confidently and declared that Gilliam would certainly be able to handle Michael Lyon Bloomwell in the duel. The knights whispered among themselves, stating that based on reputation alone, it was obvious Gilliam surpassed Michael Lyon Bloom. They added that Michael was still in the development phase, while Sir Gilliam was already a fully seasoned veteran. Duke Gold Pixie agreed, saying this was indeed good news, but admitted he was getting a bit of a headache over the situation. Princess Chelsea turned to him, puzzled, asking what he meant by that. The Duke explained that he had not yet introduced the person who would represent him in the duel. Both Princess Chelsea and Gilliam looked toward the person standing at the door, and the Duke clearly announced that the one who would represent him in this duel was Damien Haxon. Princess Chelsea cast a sharp, hateful glare at Damien. Then she turned to her father, shocked, questioning what he meant by that and reminding him that she had asked him to wait until her return. The Duke replied that this was true, but he had never promised her that he would wait. Princess Chelsea objected further, saying that even now he could still change his chosen representative if he wanted. The Duke answered that he would still decide the matter. Princess Chelsea strongly voiced her disapproval, stating that she had never even heard of the name Damien Haxon before. She continued in clear frustration, asking why her father would choose an unknown knight like Damien over someone as obvious as Sir Gillen Blackwing. Willem smiled upon hearing Chelsea's words about him. Damien noticed Gilling's gaze and began to wonder internally whether this man was the one he had been anticipating. Duke Gold Pixie explained to Princess Chelsea that while Sir Gilliam indeed had an impressive reputation, Damien Haxon had demonstrated his exceptional skill by successfully blocking Hobbit's attack. Princess Chelsea let out a short sigh and told her father that he always had such excellent excuses for ignoring her own capabilities. She continued accusing him of consistently contradicting himself through his words and actions, especially toward her and her mother. The Duke cut her off sharply, warning her to watch her words in front of their guests. Chelsea quickly interrupted herself and apologized to her father, explaining that she was exhausted from travel and not in her right state of mind. From a distance, Damien observed the heated exchange between the Duke and his daughter and thought to himself that there were clearly deep-rooted tensions between them. The Duke decisively ended the conversation, telling his daughter that the matter of changing the official representative would be decided after consulting with the other officials and ordered her to stop arguing and leave the room at once. Suddenly, Ghislaine began laughing hysterically, confusing everyone present. He then addressed the Duke, saying that a man should stand by his words. Senior Knight Heinrich was visibly irritated by Ghislaine's insolence. Ghislaine then approached Damien and told him that he wanted to settle who the real candidate should be through a duel between the two of them. Princess Chelsea stood up, shouting at Sir Gilliam Blackwing in agitation, demanding to know what he was doing and reminding him clearly that she had told him to remain calm and avoid unnecessary actions. Duke Gold Pixie responded coolly and calmly, saying that what Gilliam had said was not exactly wrong, causing Princess Chelsea to grow even more frustrated. The Duke then turned toward Damien and asked him directly for his opinion on the current situation. Damien thought quietly and clearly to himself, realizing that Duke Gold Pixie was testing him again, and decided it was necessary to display some strength in order to resolve the situation. Still, Damien affirmed internally that it would be best to find a way to resolve the matter without an actual fight. He then approached Gilliam and extended his hand toward him. He declared that there were matters that needed clarification now and suggested settling the issue with a direct test of strength. Sir Gilliam smirked mockingly and warned Damien that if his arm got dislocated during the clash, he should not blame him. Damien replied with a chilling smile, saying that in that case, he would dislocate Gilliam's shoulder instead, which greatly startled Sir Gilliam. Sir Gilliam's expression turned furious, and he clenched his teeth in clear outrage at what he had just heard. In the next moment, Sir Gilliam charged at full force and grabbed Damien's hand swiftly, but Damien easily dodged the direct attack and seized Sir Gilliam's arm in a way that completely caught him off guard. Sir Ghislaine was stunned as his entire body flipped through the air due to Damien's sudden and unexpected movement. He slammed into the ground with obvious force and violence, leaving everyone in the room completely shocked by what had just happened. Senior Knight Heinrich stood watching the scene in visible astonishment, mentally noting that Damien Haxon had done an excellent job. Heinrich began to analyze what had happened, explaining that Sir Ghislaine had initially tried to grab Damien's hand, but the Duke clarified that Damien had instead used Ghislaine's strength against him with impressive precision, slamming him to the ground. Heinrich added that Damien had demonstrated not only great physical power, but also truly outstanding combat technique. Sir Ghislaine glared furiously at Damien, wondering to himself how Damien had dared to humiliate him like that. Damien smiled calmly and commented that Sir Ghislaine was stronger than he had expected, and that he really had intended only to dislocate his shoulder. Sir Ghislaine screamed furiously and raised his weapon high, preparing to fight seriously. He charged forward, consumed with anger, clearly intent on attacking Damien. Princess Chelsea screamed in panic, calling out to Sir Ghislaine and begging him to stop immediately, but Sir Ghislaine ignored her plea. Sir Ghislaine shouted in rage that he would crush Damien's skull in a single blow. Just as he was attacking, a loud voice suddenly ordered him to stop. Immediately, Senior Knight Heinrich appeared, issuing a harsh threat to Sir Ghislaine. Heinrich expressed deep anger at Ghislaine's audacity for recklessly drawing a weapon in the presence of the Duke. He then asked in a clear and threatening tone whether Ghislaine truly wished to die for what he had just done. A terrifying aura began radiating from Heinrich's body as he glared at Ghislaine with intense fury. Damien was stunned and deeply impressed by the knight's fearsome aura, thinking to himself that this was the true power of a high-ranking knight. But Heinrich, in respect for Princess Chelsea's status, said calmly that he would let this incident pass once. However, he warned Ghislaine sternly that there would be no second chance if anything like this ever happened again. Sir Ghislaine stood panting and exhausted after the confrontation, swallowing hard as he showed clear signs of tension from what had just happened. Duke Gold Pixie clapped his hands and calmly commented that what had occurred was merely a minor disturbance, nothing worth worrying about. He continued speaking and announced to everyone that it would be best for Damien to remain the Duke's official representative in the upcoming duel. Hobbits interjected with frustration, telling the Duke that the duel that had just taken place was completely unfair. Hobbits justified his point by saying that Sir Gilliam Blackwing had not yet recovered from the fatigue of travel, which meant Damien had a significant advantage. But Knight Vincenzo chimed in, saying that it also had to be acknowledged that Sir Guillaume uses weapons in combat, so his real skill could not be judged properly while unarmed. Princess Chelsea eagerly agreed with Knight Vincenzo, and added that it was only fair to compare both knights' skills through an official duel. Duke Gold Pixie angrily ordered his daughter to stop stirring up trouble, but his frustration grew and he harshly told her to stop displaying such incompetence in front of everyone. Princess Chelsea felt deeply embarrassed and humiliated. She quietly admitted that she had indeed behaved rudely. Damien stepped forward and addressed her gently, calling her Your Highness the Princess. In an attempt to calm her and ease the tense situation, he raised his hand quietly and politely asked if he might say something. Everyone turned toward him, wondering what he intended to say. In that moment, after the meeting ended, Victor asked Damien why he had agreed to fight that duel. He felt there had been no need for it. Damien replied that there is always a reason for everything. Damien noticed the workshop the Duke had mentioned earlier and wondered if this was the place he had referred to. Victor confirmed that it was indeed the workshop the Duke had meant. Damien recalled Duke Gold Pixie's words, who had told him earlier that his sword had been broken during the duel with hobbits, and so he had ordered the duchy's blacksmith to forge a new blade specially for him. Damien thought to himself that an ordinary person might believe a basic training sword would suffice, but this particular sword commissioned by the Duke was not something one could acquire easily, even within the duchy itself. Damien and Victor entered the workshop, and one of the blacksmiths was surprised to see them. The blacksmith explained that he had already been informed of their arrival. He asked Damien and Victor to follow him inside the workshop so he could show them the sword that had been forged. Damien was greatly surprised by the number of high-quality weapons inside the workshop and mentioned this to Victor. Suddenly, Damien's attention was drawn to a very distinctive sword among the displayed weapons. He wondered internally whether this was the sword that had been specially prepared for him by the Duke. The blacksmith noticed Damien's interest in that sword and asked if he was interested in it, since it truly did have a unique design. The blacksmith began explaining the story behind the sword, saying that the knight who commissioned it had said he would give it a specific name before disappearing. Damien then suggested that it might have been a special order blade, leaving the blacksmith surprised by how Damien could possibly know that. Damien said to himself that the sword resembled one used long ago by a man known as the Evil Sword Master. Damien then decided that he would take this sword. The blacksmith was surprised by Damien's choice, especially knowing the unusual materials from which it had been forged. Damien continued his inner thoughts, saying that this sword was different from other rare swords because it had the ability to amplify magic. He then asked the blacksmith if the sword had a name. The blacksmith tried to recall the name, saying that the knight who ordered it had wanted to call it the Sword of 1,000 Miles. Suddenly, a young maid entered the workshop and politely introduced herself to Damien, telling him her name was Rebecca and that she served Princess Chelsea. Rebecca stood with obvious courtesy and reiterated that she was there to escort Damien to where the princess wished to meet him. She calmly explained that Princess Chelsea wanted to meet him personally and asked whether he had time to see her. Damien responded calmly that he did not think he had much to discuss with the princess. Rebecca smiled gently and said that nothing was certain yet, implying that Princess Chelsea might have more depth than she seemed. She continued, indirectly suggesting that the princess's intent was to persuade Damien of something, and that it would be better for him to comply rather than refuse. Damien quietly agreed to Rebecca's request and asked her to lead the way to the meeting place. Rebecca walked with Damien through the palace corridors and gardens. She explained to him that the place they were heading to was a restaurant personally managed by Princess Chelsea, a private, reservation-only venue exclusive to nobles. Rebecca added that the restaurant had been fully cleared out for the day specifically for Damien's visit. She pointed toward the restaurant and told Damien that the princess was already waiting for him inside. Damien quietly responded that he understood and told Rebecca he would enter immediately. He stood at the restaurant door, wondering to himself what kind of proposal Princess Chelsea might suddenly present to him. Damien noticed a strange and distinct scent wafting from inside the place. Upon entering, Princess Chelsea greeted him calmly, telling him that he was a little late for their meeting. She sat at the table inside and asked Damien to come quickly and sit with her. Princess Chelsea smiled mysteriously as she addressed him by name, Damien Haxon, while exuding great confidence. In the restaurant, Damien asked Princess Chelsea directly why she had summoned him there in private. She answered with complete composure, saying that he seemed to be in a hurry and suggested they speak while enjoying dinner, which would be served shortly. But Damien declined the wait and told her plainly that he did not wish to waste his time on idle conversation and asked her to state what she wanted immediately. Princess Chelsea accepted his request and told him clearly that she had only one thing to ask him. She continued, asking Damien to step down from his position as the official representative of House Gold Pixie in the upcoming duel. Damien asked her whether she did not trust Sir Guillaume. She replied that he should not misunderstand her. Someone like Sir Guillaume, if wielding his axe, could make someone like Damien utterly insignificant. She continued, saying that her intention was to preserve all of their strength for the duel against the Marquis. That was why she was asking him to step down. Chelsea explained that she did not want to risk any losses or even minor injuries from a pointless skirmish, and told him that if he resigned as representative, she would grant him anything he desired in return. Damien asked what reason he would have to yield to her demand. Princess Chelsea smiled confidently and told him that nobles like him, poor nobles, usually had very obvious desires. Damien asked her directly whether she truly knew what he wanted. She continued speaking, saying that poor nobles usually desired things like wealth, fame, and similar ambitions. Damien felt a surge of anger internally at her arrogant tone, noting to himself how presumptuous it was for her to judge others so superficially. Princess Chelsea continued, stating that Duke Gold Pixie could offer Damien all of those things far better than Marcus Lion Bloom ever could. She told him it would be wiser to side with the true and future Duke. She ended her statement with a smile, telling Damien that if he had understood her well, he should go to her father immediately and inform him of his resignation from the role of official representative of the duchy. At that moment, a dark and ominous aura began to emanate from Princess Chelsea, making the atmosphere extremely tense. A heavy silence fell as Damien stood completely calm, staring straight ahead without saying a single word. He then clearly and firmly rejected the offer that had been made to him. Princess Chelsea was visibly stunned by Damien's unexpected refusal, and she shouted in disbelief, saying that this could not be real. Damien smiled inwardly and told himself he understood perfectly well why Princess Chelsea was now anxious, because he hadn't fallen under the effect of the enchanted perfume she was using. He recalled that the enchanted perfume was a potent form of dark magic typically used to control the will of others by inducing a false sense of attraction, knowledge he had from his past life. He had recognized the presence of that enchanted scent the moment he entered the room. He noted in his thoughts that any ordinary person would become a completely obedient slave within just 1 hour of breathing in that dense magical aroma. But Damien affirmed to himself that his unique ability, Authority of Greed, had completely absorbed the effects of the dark magic, rendering the perfume entirely useless on him. As Princess Chelsea sat there stunned, Damien asked her what exactly she meant when she said, "This cannot be happening." Chelsea shouted angrily, demanding to know why he would reject her offer, insisting she had already promised to give him everything he desired. Damien answered with total calm, saying that he did not need anything from her, and explained that what he truly wanted was something she could never give. Chelsea was shocked by his words and shouted in anger, asking what exactly he meant and what it was that he wanted. Damien smiled quietly and told her that the thing he truly desired was the happiness of his family. Chelsea was once again surprised by his completely unexpected response, and in deep confusion, she asked what he meant by it. Damien decided to leave quietly and told Princess Chelsea to inform Sir Gillen Blackwing to prepare well for the upcoming duel. Princess Chelsea's expression changed, becoming cold and serious. She told Damien calmly that it seemed he valued his family far too highly, and she began to speak in a clearly threatening tone, warning Damien that if he did not resign as the Duke's representative, she would send people to wipe out the Haxon household entirely. She went on to make her threat clear. She would send men to trample the House of Haxon mercilessly. But in the very next moment, Princess Chelsea was stunned as Damien suddenly lunged toward her with incredible speed. He grabbed Princess Chelsea by the throat with immense force, causing her to collapse to the ground, paralyzed and screaming in pain. She screamed in fury, shouting at Damien and demanding how he dared lay hands on her body in such a way. Damien did not reply. He simply stood over her, his expression full of rage, tightening his grip on her neck. Chelsea began to scream loudly in pain, gasping as she choked under his grip. The pain overwhelmed her. At that moment, her knights rushed in quickly after hearing the loud noise, calling out in panic for Princess Chelsea. The knights were horrified and furious, shouting at Damien, demanding how he dared lay a hand on her highness. One of the knights quickly tried to rush toward the princess to pull her from Damien's grasp. The next moment, Damien moved with terrifying speed, launching an attack against the knights and effortlessly dodging all of their attempts to reach him. The knights were stunned by Damien's immense power and incredible speed, completely unable to keep up or stop him. They were left shocked and terrified, falling to the ground one after another after Damien's lightning-fast counterattack. Damien looked coldly at Princess Chelsea and told her with chilling calm that, in truth, he wanted to cut off her head right now, but he would refrain because, in his opinion, that would be far too merciful a punishment for her. Damien approached Princess Chelsea and told her in a clearly threatening tone that she should properly prepare herself for the horrific fate awaiting her. He turned his head slightly and smiled with terrifying confidence as he indirectly hinted at the dreadful future that was drawing near for her. Princess Chelsea trembled where she sat on the ground, her face showing unmistakable signs of sheer terror at Damien's words. At that moment, Rebecca the maid suddenly entered the room and was deeply shocked by what she saw. She ran quickly toward Princess Chelsea and asked her with great concern whether she was all right. Princess Chelsea was filled with overwhelming fury and muttered through clenched teeth that she would definitely kill Damien Haxon, this time without fail. Then she screamed in rage, calling out for someone named Mustang. Mustang appeared immediately and loudly declared his presence upon being summoned by the princess. The princess began speaking furiously, demanding to know why the enchanted perfume had failed to work on Damien. Mustang responded with visible hesitation, saying he did not know the exact reason but explained that some individuals possess a natural resistance to dark magic. But Princess Chelsea only grew angrier and screamed at him as she hit him hard, calling him an idiot, which made him cry out in pain. She then asked harshly where Sir Guillaume Blackwing was. At that moment, Mustang answered nervously that Guillaume had gone to a tavern to drink, saying he needed a drink to calm his anger over what happened today. Princess Chelsea screamed furiously, demanding to know how Guillaume could be in a tavern when he had such an important duel the next day. She approached Mustang and screamed in his face, asking if he was really certain that Sir Guillaume Blackwing could defeat Damien Haxon. Mustang responded confidently, assuring her that Sir Guillaume was the best they had and that he had never seen a knight more skilled in dark magic. Mustang then urged Princess Chelsea to be patient, promising her that they would definitely place the entire Duke estate under her control. Chelsea glared at him with unmistakable anger and threatened him harshly, saying that he better keep his promise or he would be the first to die. Mustang became extremely flustered by the princess's threat and kept repeating nervously that he would remember her words clearly. Meanwhile, Damien stood high above, watching the entire scene unfold below with a remarkably calm and focused expression.